Warning, this podcast contains scenes of explicit nonsense and lore.
Previously on the Resident Evil podcast.
Whatever it was they were intending, it just fails.
Every room in the hospital's just chock full of details, and there's some interesting special items in this as well.
I just was so low on health that I couldn't really run past it. So.
The hard drive makes such a difference. You're talking about taking loading times down from, at times, at the worst, sort of 15 seconds down to about 4 or 5.
Batman, you have it, you've read it. Do we end on a positive?
Not really.
The Resident Evil Podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 95 of the Resident Evil Podcast, where we advocate that unique and bespoke approach, mass production.
Ridiculous.
Thank you. I'm Nick, better known as Neptune, who's just chilling at the pier. Let's see who's joining us today. He's sneakier than Nikolai in the rafters. It's the Batman.
Hello.
He's researching for his beautiful creation, It Stars Tyrant.
Dear God.
A man becoming more than our humble podcast. He has his own IMDb page. It's Romby.
Hello.
Coming up in today's podcast, we will be continuing our celebration of 20 years of Resident Evil Outbreak, the last look at Resident Evil Outbreak File 1. We'll be looking at the concluding chapter, Decisions. We'll also be catching up on the news with a sub-discussion / review of Remake VR from Stars Tyrant, and we will be ending with another quiz. So let's start with the news. Infinite Darkness news. I say that with dowsed tones, should we say, for it is possibly the end of Infinite Darkness news, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, no, it's not, Nick. Stop lying.
At long last, the trade paperback is out now. So that's the collection of all 5 issues of the Infinite Darkness manga. It's now collected in a nice book. I have it. Sean, you have it.
I have. I've not turned a page on it yet.
You've not turned a page. It is nice. It's nice. I'm going to go and grab it now. Hold on.
Are you going to do us a story time, Nick, and read it out to us?
It's story time. Our tale begins. But no, it's available. I ordered it from Blackwell's. You can order it from many shops. I saw it in Forbidden Planet today for people who live in the UK. It's there. I collect a lot of comics and trade paperbacks, especially in Star Wars. So I can compare it to them in terms of quality, and it's very good, I have to say, and I really like the artwork. People may already know this, of course, because they might have collected the individual comics, but I didn't. I resisted until the paperback came out, and because you do get that bit better quality, the paper is thicker, it's not comic book paper. Yeah, I'm intrigued to have a look. I mean, a quick skim through it reveals very little zombies, I have to say, and I think this is what we've discussed in previous podcasts. It looks to be a lot of narrative, but it's here, so you can pick it up at your leisure. History tells us that it won't get much reprinting, if any. So if you are on the fence as to whether to purchase it, I would probably recommend you do so, because they become extremely hard to get hold of in the future. Death Island news! Oh yes, just when you thought Infinite Darkness news would be ending, we've got more manga news. Death Island news. The manga is ongoing and the translations are out, but the big news is that the collected edition, so a bit like what we've got here with Infinite Darkness, the collected edition is coming out on the 4th of April, so not far along at all. In fact, by the time this podcast comes out, we could be very close to it. Thanks to Kendo Gunsop for bringing this important news to my attention. Unfortunately, unlike Infinite Darkness, is not at the moment getting an official translation in the West. There is unofficial translations around on the internet, but you can pre-order the Death Island manga from games.co.jp or melonbooks.co.jp, and you get a special card, which, if that's not an incentive to pre-order, I don't know what is. As far as I know, there's not been a lot of deviation apart from the zombie line in issue 1. It's pretty much a straightforward adaptation of Death Island. Next bit of news, Remake 3 is now out on PS Plus Extra, so if you haven't had the chance to revisit Raccoon City with everyone's favourite Stars member, in my opinion, then you can do so free on PS Plus Extra. Now, I can't keep up to date with Sony's tier structure, but is that the most expensive one?
No, that's the middle tier.
Is it
Middle
right?
tier plus, because the more expensive one is the one that also adds in all the classics titles as well,
Right.
like
but
the PS1, PSP ones. So it's your mid tier and above.
Right, thank you, thanks, Rob. But it's certainly worth a play, regardless of how much how much content is in it. It's still a very fun, accessible game. So well worth playing if you subscribe. More remake news, this time from Remake 4, and perhaps unsurprisingly, Remake 4 is absolutely kicking ass in terms of sales. 7 million copies have now been sold of Remake 4, which is it's very good figures for the Resident Evil series in such a short period of time. It's rapidly going up the list, and I expect, give it a couple of years, it's going to be, I think it might take number 1 slot eventually.
It's always one of those things that's difficult to, like, not say it's difficult to measure, because obviously if it does, but then back in the day they used to count different versions separately and so forth. Now, these days, like, Gold Edition will still be counted towards these sales because fundamentally it's still the same disc with the DLC code. Whereas, like, Resident Evil 5 Gold Edition was a separate SKU unit because it was on the disc, so it has its own chart entry. So it's kind of slightly true, but also kind of misleading depending on how you scale them. Because, like, for example, Resident Evil 5, like, if you counted all the versions that they had separately on there, I think it's still the game that sold the most, with 6 not being far behind. But then as individual units, like, it's still, like, that they don't count as highly as some of the others, so it's kind of apples and oranges kind of comparison when it really should be apples and apples. But that's all right. It's still selling well. That's the important part. I mean, I think the thing is as well, if you've seen Alex Neil's been tracking the actual sales over time, it is definitely the fastest selling for the rate that it's gone at as well. So reached this point in the fastest amount of time. So that alone tells you just how well it's doing.
It's justifying the remake, isn't it? Because I think even the hardened fans would have gone, before it is announced.
I think it's tough. Like, it's justifying it for Capcom for sure. I think we're continuing this trend. Like, all the remakes have sold quite well. Even 3, was not as well received, but has still continued to sell reasonably okay, considering. And now that you've got another remake that's doing the best of all of them, like, it's only going to give more bolster to more remakes, unfortunately. But or fortunately, depending on how your outlook is. But I think that's it. I mean, why would Capcom stop now when you just released a remake that's doing the best of all of them?
Yeah.
You're going to keep trying to hit that ceiling. So
I do wonder, just from a overview point of view, whether, I mean, Resident Evil 5, as you say, Rob, is probably the most successful one in terms of sales units. It doesn't quite have the cultural zeitgeist, should we say, as Resident Evil 4 did. It's not as universally loved, but it's still a very good game. Now, I just wonder, how that would be perceived. Did Resident Evil 5 do really well because it was a sequel to 4, the first game on that generation of consoles, a lot of hype, that kind of.
I think the more interesting thing is to look at something like 6, which had a very slow start to sales, was not particularly well received critically or by fans, and yet has continued to also have legs, and now is like one of the top sales overall. It's like people later on have continued to pick it up to give it a try, even if they don't like it and find it a mess. It's still continued to sell. So I can't quantify sometimes that sales justifies quality. It's sometimes curiosity, sometimes it's just ease of access, all these different things that would quantify towards it. Because 5 and 6 you can still buy on current generation in theory, because you can play the PS4 and Xbox One X versions of them. It's not a game that you can't just pick up easily, and it's quite often up for sale for cheap. So and that's the same with 5 as well. So it's just dependent on a lot of factors. Really can't just say it's because it's great. I think in the case of 4, we can easily point to the quality of the product and the way it's been received as to why it's sold well. Same with the remake of 2. Sometimes it's just there's no explanation.
I do feel 5's kind of caught in the middle between 4 and 6. I think it's you can see the evolution between the game. I do wonder at new fans coming into the game picking up 6, as you say, on the cheap. I think it's quite an accessible game if you are used to more of the action orientated games of the era, and perhaps even now. It's a game that you can have a lot of fun with. I know, Sean, obviously you've always enjoyed 6 as a game. I don't particularly like it, but if you are that way inclined in terms of action, then I still think it holds up relatively well. So it's probably gaining perhaps more new fans than perhaps 5 would. I have absolutely no evidence about that. That's just a feeling.
Yeah, people don't like to admit it, but RE6, has some of the finest third-person shooter controls. Even including dedicated action games. It plays better than a good lot of them, to be fair. I mean, that we obviously acknowledge things like the vehicle sections and stuff are nigh unplayable, and that's absolutely a detriment to the game itself. But the actual on-foot mechanics with the sliding, the quick shooting, the quick shots and stuff like that, it's great fun.
It's a thing too, you might pick up 4 Remake and never played 5 and 6, and you kind of want to know where the series continued on from 4, even though you're playing the remake version. So of course you might be curious to pick up 5 and 6 on the cheap when you see them and play through them, and they are continuing to be, as you said in it correctly, action titles. So I wouldn't be surprised if for every sale of 4 for someone who's never played 5 or 6, it's quite a good chance that they've picked up 5 and 6 at some point. It's quite crazy to think that, but that might be why they're continuing to sell reasonably well as well.
Final bit of news, we go back to where it all started. Resident Evil 1, the original, is being nominated or is up for consideration to be inducted into the Video Game Hall of Fame. Brilliant. It's 28 years old now? I think we've just passed Resident Evil Day, haven't we?
Mm-hmm.
And the beloved original is being considered for the Hall of Fame. I mean, needless to say, I think it should go in there, but that's just I wouldn't expect anything less from everyone else here. But what a game! What a game the original still is today, and in my opinion, holds up extremely well considering the limitations of it back in the day.
There's some tough competition in those nominees. Unfortunately, it was a public vote and it has closed now, so I think it gets announced next month.
Oh, does it? Okay, right.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I have to go double check, but I think it's next month it gets announced. So, I mean, there's like Myst in there, and there's a bunch of other very famous games. I can't even remember what's on the shortlist, but there's a lot of famous games, and I don't think anyone would look at any of them and say none of them didn't deserve some consideration. So, for Resident Evil even to be included in there is very impressive too. So, it just shows you how important it is, along with some of these other games. So,
I mean, let's reflect a little bit as we're in this kind of holiday and anniversary time period. I mean, it's one of those games that in many ways you would argue Resident Evil 2 does everything Resident Evil 1 does, but better. The story's better, the story's longer, there's more arguably more replayability, and yet I think it's right that the original is nominated in that sense, because it does things that Resident Evil 2 doesn't do, and it does things, and it just sets up the entire series so well. And although it doesn't invent survival horror, it certainly put it on the map.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It's gone to a point where there were definitely games that definitely fit some of the things that the game ended up doing, but it did it either better or differently, to the point where as a collective whole it is what's established the genre as we know it. And it's why there were so many copycats and clones after its release, because it set kind of like the blueprint standard. And as the franchises continue to go on, it's continued to do that even when it's reinventing itself. So you could say the same thing about Resident Evil 4, where it's not the first game to have an over-the-shoulder mechanic in the same style, but it was definitely one to reinvent the sort of the style that people would continue to be inspired by going forwards. And the original was very much in that. You could say the same about it's a very early game for quite a high level of amount of voice acting. Yes, of course, you wouldn't say the quality is particularly great, but up until that point, a lot of games in that era, they had a lot of FMVs, which obviously Resident Evil also has in its opening and ending cutscenes. But it also had this sort of impact of you can use the CD medium and actually put voice acting through the entire game, which not a lot of games would kind of do. They'd use them very sporadically and kind of only when necessary. You wouldn't have these fully animated cutscenes with voices the whole way through, and it was also a new thing at that time. And there was a few other games obviously that also done it, but again, it's one of those things that shaped the sort of interactive movie, B-movie kind of feel of it. And I think it definitely was one of the ones that also set that trend for games going forward.
I still find it the most accessible out of the original trilogy myself. If I'm ever in the mood for classic RE, it's the game I get out, whether it's on the original disc or director's cut on PSN or anything like that. There's something about it. It's probably because I know it so well. I find it a little bit more pick up and play. You can get quite a lot done. Comfort.
It's comfort food, Nick. That's what it is. You're just
It
so
really
happy.
is. You are. That's the thing. You play it, and I'm just smiling. Every noise, every sound effect, every track, for audio from every room. The stupid Barry lines. You just can't. Well, I mean, we've waxed lyrical about the original game so much. And people love the remake, as you should, but there is, and we've discussed before, there is something about the original, because it's so well lit, it makes it so unnerving that there is something clearly wrong with this house.
It's a doll's house.
Yeah.
It's what it feels like. It feels like a doll's house. For me, it has the most unique atmosphere of any game in the series. The remake is a very, very good haunted house, but it feels more like an elaborate, staged haunted house that you'd go through when you're going on. It feels like a ride. It feels like you're going through the corridors at Alton Towers before you get on the haunted house ride. It's so elaborately staged with the perfect lighting, and the cobwebs and the very carefully selected camera angles. It's a wonderful game. Remake's probably the best game in the series in terms of out and out sort of quality and capturing the essence of what a pure Resident Evil title is. But that original, man, there's nothing like it in the series. Not even Resident Evil 2, and that's probably the one that's closest to it in terms of the original aesthetic.
I mean, this is the thing. It was a game that was designed, with the intent of not knowing it was going to be as successful as it was. I mean, it's the game that essentially saved Capcom in the mid-90s when they were struggling, and no one thought it was ever going to be the case. It almost got cancelled, and yet, here we are 28 plus years now celebrating still the original for what it achieved. It's very much worth mentioning just how important it is in that regard too.
And one of the key persons behind it, of course, Shinji Mikami, has also made the news. He's setting up a new production studio.
Yeah, I read the news that there was a profile provided for they're doing a remastering of Shadows of the Damned? Oh my god, my brain's gone blank. Can someone correct me?
5.1.
Yeah. And it's getting a remastering, and so of course they put up studio profiles and creative profiles for those involved, and it includes an announcement that Mikami's got a newly named studio in there. And he had previously said he was waiting for his non-compete to complete from his departure from Tango, but that his focus for setting up something new was to go back to his roots and focus more on creating new games, because he's been mostly stuck into a producer and executive producer role, which admittedly he's very good at. Like, he's had a good run of mini games under those terms, as well as he has been a director, but he hasn't directed a game since The Evil Within, which was over 10 years ago. So yeah, it's probably for him due for a new game that he gets to control and be in charge of.
Well, that's it for gaming news. We now move over to site news, where we first want to thank a few new patrons who have joined us. So a big thank you to Stefan Plakanika and Turtle Talk. Thank you so much for joining. If anyone's interested in our Patreon, then you can head over to our website. There's a link on there at the bottom, or click under the community tab. You'll find a link there if you are interested. The only other bit of site news, of course, we now have an episode guide we've put up on the website. If you go to our podcasts tab on the podcast page, you'll find a link there, or it's under the bonus material under the extra stuff. You'll find there, which is quite handy because we do forget what episodes are covered. So if people say, which episode did you do Resident Evil 2 episode, this is a really handy way because it's broken down by game as opposed to episode number. So you can find out, if you want to listen back to some Dead Aim stuff, you can just go and find the ones appropriate to you. So we'll be updating that as we go. That does conclude all our site news. We now have a sub-discussion where we're going to be talking about Resident Evil 4 Remake, the VR edition, which we teased and promised you a couple of podcasts ago, but now the excitement of Outbreak was too much. So they went on far more in depth than we ever envisaged. But thankfully, because we're only covering one chapter of Outbreak today, we've got a bit of time. And Stars, thankfully, you have finished Remake 4, so you can give us a nice overview of how did you find it on the PSVR 2?
It's a bullet bonanza! Fire everything you've got!
Well, first of all, I just want to apologise for the length of time it's taken to finish it, because obviously, it launched in, was it November last year? We're now in March, in the year of our Lord 2024, and I only finished it, I think it was just before we recorded the Hive and Below Freezing Point podcast. I'm a few months on. It did take a while. I can't get games finished in record time anymore, unfortunately. I'm nothing but glowing praise for RE4 VR. I think it is absolutely exceptional and will probably be my preferred way of playing the game.
Really?
In the years to come. Yeah, it really is. It's a dazzling experience. I always had a feeling it was going to be good, because with 3 VR experiences in with Capcom and Resident Evil now, one of which was the original RE4 on the Oculus Quest devices. So I always had it in mind that it was going to be pretty good, and certainly building off the foundations of the advanced gunplay and everything that they had in Village VR. There was a recipe of success in a game that is more focused in combat than Village was. And when you pick it up and play it, my God, it doesn't disappoint. The parrying mechanic in VR is ridiculously good fun, and everything else on top of that, through the dual wielding pistols, all the little extras that you can't do in the vanilla game, all just adds to this experience where you just feel, it sounds ridiculous, but when you've got the headset on and you've got the motion controllers in your hand and you're literally ducking and weaving and parrying with your knife, you feel invincible. I guess you kind of must feel like what it's like to be Leon, just a tiny bit in your living room or wherever you choose to play these experiences. It's got one hand pumping on shotguns and things like that. It's so crazy good. I have no criticism for it at all. It's going to be interesting to see if the much rumoured PlayStation 5 Pro will improve the VR experience a little bit, because even though obviously this is a PlayStation 5 powering up VR2, there are some visual cutbacks and some slight, I almost want to say ghosting in terms of how the image is reconstructed. When you move very quickly, you'll see some slight distortions and things. It's not as clean an experience, I found, as people would like to, as maybe would have hoped. But it doesn't detract, and once you've been immersed into the game for 5-10 minutes, you've completely forgotten about all that, because the game is just taking you over. There's a lot of less interactivity in Resident Evil 4 Remake VR. So anyone who's played Village will know you could press the buttons on the motion controllers and actually clench Ethan's hands, and you could use them to punch windows out, and you could physically open drawers and cupboards. You can't do any of that in Resident Evil 4 Remake VR. But I don't actually think that matters in this case. I know some people have accused the game of actually sort of stripping away the interactivity. And to some extent, I do agree. But Resident Evil 4 is so much more of a faster paced game. And so much of that game is resource gathering for your crafting and everything like that. And what you don't want to be doing in a game like Resident Evil 4 is constantly having to drop your guns to then, physically manipulate a drawer or open a cupboard. Everything's just done with an X prompt now. So as soon as you go up to something, you just press X, the box or the drawer or whatever will just shatter or open, and then you can just pick up the item straight away without having to drop your weapons or anything like that. And what that does is it keeps the game's combat more seamless and flowing. And I think that works to its success. And it also gives Village a little bit of an edge in itself for doing something a little bit different. The game's horror is ramped up a lot in VR as well. I think there's certain areas where you were going through the dark, the cave underneath Salazar's throne room is really, really excellent in VR, with the novistadors jumping out the water and stuff.
Yep.
Slowly skulking through that with a headset on, with very little visibility, just having to sort of look for the shimmers in the water. You just can't, unless you play it for yourself, it's really hard to explain how great that is. You can actually also physically hold a torch, like you could in Village. So you can hold a torch in one hand and a gun in the other, and that just all just works exceptionally well. It is a dazzling experience. It's expensive. It's far too much money. It's hard to recommend because of that. But if you do find yourself with the opportunity to play it, I would just beg and beg and beg to give it a try. You will not. It just basically makes a great game even better.
Does the handholds that you have, does that have haptic feedback as well for the guns?
Yep. So
okay, so that's
they
nice.
vibrate very well. They don't have like the trigger pulls, but they do vibrate.
Okay.
I mean that would be ridiculous, Nick. But
I don't-
if they had like actual realistic trigger pulls and stuff like that, would be amazing. But unfortunately, they don't.
What does the? I mean, there's got to be some bits that it does better than. I mean, you said the interactivity is possibly a little bit worse, but the feeling's not sure. What about some of the boss battles?
Well,
How do they compare?
You could actually argue this is where one of the areas where like the VR experience is a touch broken, because you actually do have additional maneuverability.
Right.
So, for example, in the Mendez fight, when he's doing the ranged, like burning bits of wood throw at you, you don't actually physically have to move. You just lunge to left or right, and the headset will dodge for you. You will. Sorry, you have to physically move, but you don't have to sidestep or anything like that. You can just lean.
Right.
Whereas obviously in the vanilla game, you actually have to physically move, and Leon's not always the most agile, especially with the way the inertia and the movement works in Resident Evil 4 Remake. If you're running, there's no snap movement in that game. So if Leon's running one direction, you quickly need to turn. You've got that slow inertia before he snaps and turns, if you like. Whereas in VR, you don't have that. You just literally just dive out the way, and it makes that whole thing so much more easy with obviously VR aiming. So anyone who struggles with like twin stick aiming and things like that, you have no issue now. You just literally look down the iron sights and shoot. So it feels like a light gun game in many ways. If anyone's pretty skilled with a light gun game, you'll be pretty good in VR as well, because you're using those similar sort of reflexes and skills. People will have seen the meme videos of people going into like the Krauser fight with dual knives and just literally just running up to him and stabbing him like 60 times in 5 seconds in the face, and that works. He will die very, very quickly. But all of those are just you having fun with something. You don't have to play it like as ridiculous as that. I play through a lot of it with dual wielding pistols, and it's just great fun because you role play it as much as you want. And if you want to, if you really get invested in it and you play very silly like I do, like when I'm going up to walls, I will actually hold the gun in a certain way and then lean around a corner. I know there's no enemies because I've played the game before. I know where the scripted moments are. I still role play it because it's kind of fun too.
Do you wish it had been a bit like 7? You could have done it from the beginning.
In what sense do you mean?
Well, you could, when the game first loaded up. Or I know PSVR 2 wasn't. Was it out by? I can't remember when it released. But with 7, you could have played the game from fresh. First experience of things like the Ashley experience as well. I wondered her little section, how good was that? Do you think it would have been better if you'd done it in VR? And it's different because it's a remake. You know what's kind of coming as well.
The saddest thing I have to say is that beyond the Quest version of Resident Evil 4, which of course I've played Resident Evil 4 hundreds of times, but I'm still yet to do a pure Resident Evil experience the first time through VR, because my original PSVR 1 was delayed because of shortages, so I couldn't play 7 because I didn't want to wait. Village obviously didn't launch with a VR mode, and likewise with 4, we've had to wait for that to come out. So yeah, I'll never know, Nick. I mean, I would love to do it. I'd love to have the first time through, because I can imagine certain sections would be terrifying. It's like the Beneviento section in Village. I think I wouldn't be here. I think I'd literally had my life scared out of my body if that was the first time going through that in VR, because it was fucking bad enough as a 2D experience. That fucking baby coming towards you in VR the first time, if you didn't know it was coming and that was a brand new experience, it's like no thank you. My soul would have left this plane of existence.
I hope if they do 9 because I think they'll do the same with this. I think they'll do it first person, and I think they'll do it third person.
Yeah, I'd love to see a hybrid of it, and there's no reason for them to, beyond cost, and that is a thing in itself. I don't think there's any reason for Capcom to abandon this, because they are. I love the fact that I'm a VR enthusiast, and there's something really special about the fact that like my favorite game company and franchise is having such a push in that field. They're not just exploring it; they're succeeding in it and offering. I'm lucky enough to have played a lot of VR experiences, and I have to say, like, the Resident Evil games are like industry leading at times in terms of what they're offering, because they're offering like they're not just like bolt-on modes and quirky little mini games. These are the full campaigns with no cuts, sometimes even a little bit of extra things in there that the vanilla game doesn't have. You can talk about things like Half-Life Alyx, as probably being a better experience, but the Resident Evil ones are every bit up there, and that's just so cool to me that I can actually be in that world. It's something that we talked about, Resident Evil being 28 years old. You couldn't have told me, my 13, 14-year-old self that one day, you'll put on, one day VR will be so good that you'll have visuals better than what you're playing now on your PlayStation 1, and you'll be in it. It's amazing.
So well worth a pickup if you can.
One thing I was just going to do is I'm just going to quickly rank how I feel the 4 experiences are. I'll just do this briefly. I think in last place, I would give the Quest version of Resident Evil 4. And the reason why I would put that last is there was this great experience. The game is fundamentally broken to implement VR. And there's obviously limitations with how old the game is now. It's not quite as immersive because you're still looking at, despite the texture enhancements and everything, you're still looking at a near 20-year-old game. So you don't quite have that level of immersion. It's just a really good, fun arcade experience. It does have a really good Mercenaries mode. It's actually an enhanced version of the Mercenaries mode with a lot more little mini games and objectives and things. So that's pretty cool. After that, I would say Village, because Village, I think's a game that's not aging as well as we would maybe like to have hoped. And I think playing it in VR only highlights how linear that game is to a fault. Certain sections are great in it, but the combat's definitely reduced from other games. So it's still great. And like I say, the level of interactivity, the stuff you can do with Ethan's hands is, very welcome. You've got like the little throwing knives and things. But I would still say you're far away from what is the definitive experience. In second place, and these last two are interchangeable depending on what you want. But in second place, I would give RE4 VR, Remake VR, because despite the fact that it's a fully motion controlled experience, I've praised it so well, but there's something about Resident Evil 7's VR even now that I think is still the best. And I think what it does is because it doesn't have those motion controls, because it's exactly the same experience as like you or Rob will have played, in that you sit down, you hold a controller, and you play the same game. The difference is I have a headset on, and so the world just washes over me because you don't have to think about where I'm stood in my living room or where I'm, what my arm's going to flail into. I don't have to think about how to manually reload these guns. I just sit and play a Resident Evil experience. And because that game is so tailored to it, every single thing has been refined and worked out. I think it's just essentially perfect. So my award goes to Resident Evil 7 VR, but the top two are interchangeable depending on what mood you're in or what you want to do. Yeah, and then final thing I just want to touch upon is we've seen news in the last couple of weeks that Sony have halted production on PlayStation VR 2. It's no surprise, it's far too expensive. And I say, even as an enthusiast, I say it's far too expensive. To play Resident Evil 4 VR, Remake VR, you need to basically be spending over £1,000, and that's a lot. It's a big ask at a time in human history where the cost of living has probably never been higher for a lot of people. To just to go for a luxury item like that, it is a big ask. If anyone ever listens to our podcast, get Sony and Capcom talking to each other. And when they relaunch production on PSVR 2, get this game and Village bundled into a brand new SKU on the box, put Leon's face all over it, make this a marketable thing. You've got one of the industry-leading VR titles in 4 Remake VR. Get that in there selling your unit. Get a box on the shelf that has PlayStation VR, bundled with Resident Evil 4 and Village. Get these games free as part of like the VR 2 experience. It might not make a great deal of difference, but it might just do a little bit, because Resident Evil is a big draw. You've seen how much that can shift systems for people. I know we ourselves on the podcast have bought consoles specifically for playing a new Resident Evil game. This series shifts things, it shifts units. And to not lean on one of the best VR experiences that gaming offers at the moment, it's an open goal for Sony that they need to be getting on with.
Thank you, Sean. That was a really, really interesting and detailed review of Remake 4. So thank you for that. Some interesting conclusions as well. Let's hope Resident Evil 7 comes out on PSVR 2. That does finish our review. We now turn our attention to the main topic of the podcast. It's our 20th anniversary look back and celebration of Resident Evil Outbreak. Decisions.
Too much growth weakens an organization. What should be important becomes overshadowed by greed. Mass production? Ridiculous! masterpiece is enough.
Welcome, one and all. Oh, decisions. What a chapter, what a scenario. It's one of those scenarios which I think we've talked about before in previous podcasts, where it's basically an entire Resident Evil game in bite-sized format. I think I mentioned previously I'd never completed it before, but I was determined this time to do so, and I'm pleased to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that I did complete it without becoming a zombie, which firstly is a miracle, and secondly, it was an eye-opening experience for me, and I hope if anyone is playing along or, got that bug to replay it. Decisions it's quite an impressive chapter in my opinion. So we're going to quickly go through the team, do our usual impressions, and we're going to go through it from beginning to end, telling everyone what our experiences were, where we went wrong, which route we took, which is a fascinating insight, and how our compatriots inevitably met a sticky demise. Unless you're John, because I think all your players survived, didn't they, John?
Yes, I think from memory they did.
Yeah, well, we can't all be as good as you at those games, but we will. So we'll start with you, Batman. It's a good start. How did you find Decisions 20 years on?
I enjoyed it. It's been a long time since I played Decisions, so I couldn't really remember anything about it in terms of, puzzles and the routes. It took me 2 attempts. The first attempt, I did try and do the water treatment facility route. I seemed to get hopelessly lost, and then I climbed up a ladder and kind of ended up back where I started, by the docks. And then when I tried to go past the Neptunes again, one of them pushed me into the water. So I was swimming around with them for about 3 minutes trying to get out before I eventually got eaten. The second time I did the emissions tower route, and that's the wonderful thing about this scenario, goes with the name, I suppose, that, the optional routes round it. Classic slice of Resident Evil, lovely detailed areas to explore, nice variation of enemies, some good puzzles, and it's just, a nice sort of standalone story, even though it does tie into the Resident Evil 3, I suppose, in some respects with the appearance of Nikolai, but yeah, I very much enjoyed it.
Robbie, what about you? How did you find this one?
Yeah, it is the one that I'd spent the least amount of time with in the past as well, much like yourself, Nick. So I think I had finished it, but gosh, I don't know. I think I haven't played it since it first came out. So it's interesting coming back to it. I think it's the most varied and interesting scenario out of the lot. So, it's pretty much along the lines of how you introduced it. I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. I still have my foibles with the whole gameplay mechanics and so forth, which did not help my way through the scenario. I felt I was going very slowly, but overall enjoyed it. I can't really say much more in an intro that you guys both haven't already said, really.
Stars Time, what about you? It's one of your favourites, I believe.
Across all the 10 scenarios we were gifted with, this one is by and far my favourite. Yeah, I think it is dazzling. Like you say, it's a fully featured Resident Evil game, in a very digestible, bite-sized form. It's got everything, it's got the opening haunted house style set up with the university, with your traditional puzzles and things like that. You go down to some sort of facility or water treatment works, then you end up in a little bit of a lab for a final tyrant battle to conclude this, scenario. Excellent. What more would anyone want, I ask you? I think it's a really well-designed scenario. It's got, like John says, the Nikolai Easter egg as such. He's not in it a great deal, but it's still a nice little appearance. And it just feels like a celebration. We've said this before, like Outbreak felt like a celebration of that classic sort of era. We knew with Resident Evil 4 coming on the horizon that, things were going to change. And having, one last little time of running around, these hallways with luscious carpets and wooden doors, putting in, red and blue gems into in this case, a moose's head to open a secret door. It just really did feel like this was going to be the last time we were going to do this kind of stuff for a while. And it was great. I really, really love it. In terms of my run, I thankfully did it in one go. My memory helped me out on a lot of it, but I was the sole survivor, unfortunately.
I'll spare my details for where my characters departed, should we say, but heroic, all of them, and I'll forever be grateful. Yeah, so like people have said, it's one of those games where I think the offline, because I played it offline, like I've said in previous ones, I think this scenario really struggles with the offline concept as well. I played as Yoko as I always did, which really helped in terms of surviving long enough because I think it's a bit like End of the Road. They're much longer than the previous chapters, which you could probably get done within an hour and a bit. This one took me 2 hours, just over 2 hours. And if you're playing as other characters, you're pushing it a little bit there with the kind of viral counter. So I needed a little bit of prompting, should we say, from the guides, because the offline mode just doesn't tailor to how I would play this game. And I think if I were to play it as I would like, my run through would probably be about 5 hours on this game. Just because, as you said, it is a quintessential Resident Evil experience, and I just want to stay in that environment for as long as I could. There are rooms I never went into. There are, things I didn't explore because I was determined to actually complete this. I'd never completed it before. So I was quite adamant that I wanted to get to the end. And this artificial counter, we've mentioned it before. I just don't like it in offline mode, and I think this chapter and End of the Road, although End of the Road's a bit more linear, I think from my memory, you kind of go from one bit to the next whereas this one is a big hub area, isn't it? You can go everywhere. It's just one massive hub, and I just have this inherent urge just to explore every nook and cranny, get all the environmental storytelling, look in every drawer, pick that up, can't pick that up, leave that there. What does this do? I'm going to take it with me. Can't take that or drop that. And the game will not let me do that. And I'm at peace with it, but I don't like it. And you are punished if you have that mindset, especially in this one. And
this scenario is particularly vicious, Nick, because by the time you are offered an opportunity to finally rid yourself of the virus gauge, there's a fucking countdown because the place is going to blow up.
That too. And I think we've mentioned before, and this was the real kicker with this one. Would your NPC be waiting for you? And we'll get to why they should be waiting for you and what they're waiting you for later on. And I don't know what I would have done had old David not been waiting for me with his V poison. But thankfully he was. I thought this might be quite a good one to start with, a bit of a lore discussion before we start the actual playthrough, because I think it's quite a simple one to place. But there are some lore elements we can discuss perhaps a little bit later on. So, I assume it's the 1st, isn't it? We're going 1st of October.
Yeah, it's literally probably about an hour before the missile hits. You find the file from Nikolai, obviously talking about Operation Emperor's Mushroom, and it gives a timestamp of 5:35 a.m. And if you examine some of the windows inside the university, it says it's getting light outside or the sun is rising. So this is, it's literally less than an hour before the missile hits.
The only contentious moment is the bit with George in the RPD.
Yeah.
Right at the beginning.
Yeah, you'd have to assume that he probably finds that a good 6 or 7 hours before, and it's taken them some time to get to the university, perhaps.
So for that, we're assuming that happens after Desperate Times, we're jumping ahead to Outbreak File 2, and they kind of just hold up in the RPD.
Yeah, Desperate Times happens on the 27th, so by this point, I think the police station's just totally abandoned, and there's just a few survivors just loitering in the garage because they've got nowhere else to go.
So have you always had it so that they're there from the 27th to the...
No, there's no way to tell. They could have just turned up at any point, not realising all the police had been wiped out. But I would probably say that George finds that letter either sort of late in the day on September 30th or very early hours, October 1st, and then it takes them several hours to get across to the university. But by the time you start the scenario, it's about 5:30 a.m.
Does that cause an issue for Nikolai being there so late in the university to where he should be in Resident Evil 3?
It does, really, yeah. It's kind of funny, really, that out of all the scenarios, they decided to give him a cameo in. It had to be this one, which clashes with Resident Evil 3. I suppose it depends how far away the university is from the dead factory, but he basically, when Jill arrives at the factory, you'll get that scene of Nikolai shutting the door and locking himself away, and then at some point after that, he's got to go all the way to the university, kill Greg, and then come back. It's not the most natural of fits, put it that way.
Is the university's not on the map, is it? The Raccoon City
on the east side near the river.
Let me have a look. The fabled map of...
Sure, it's far on the east side, right next to the river that you obviously see in the game.
I don't think the university is. I think it's the Raccoon Elementary School that's on the
map.
map.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have a look. The only reason I remember it, as sort of, and apologies in advance for bringing this up, is because I remember looking at it for the purposes of an untitled mobile game that also that features a university.
I'm just picturing you, Nick, now going through your like your Star Wars shelf that everybody's seen, going through like old rolled up maps, like Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, and now you're just unfurling this old, slightly burnt at the edges map that you've made of Raccoon City.
It's the City College of Raccoon, is it? Is that what it is? That's relatively near the Dead Factory.
Is it on the map?
There's something called the City College of Raccoon City. So whether that's different to Raccoon University, university is not really an American term, is it?
To any graduate, you'd never mix up college or university. It's something. It's a very contentious thing for a lot of students, isn't it?
Is it? Yeah, I'm unaware of the American.
I didn't go to college. I went to university. Thank you.
Okay. So university is an American term as well. I thought it was they all called them. I don't know. There you go. Apologies, American listeners.
Term, yeah, UCLA and stuff like that.
Oh yes, quite right. Yeah, no, you're right, John. I don't think typically it's on the map, but obviously the Dead Factory is quite close over the circular river, isn't it? So
yeah, I mean, basically they should have put Nikolai in any other scenario apart from this one. And that would have helped immensely.
That said, what an appearance, though, from him. It's a hugely memorable one, this.
Calm down.
your blood, give me your blood. But his takedown of Greg is one of the all-time most spectacular bits of violence in the series. It's actually ludicrous how violent it is.
That's a very cool scene, though, where he's just sat there in the rafters with his pistol. That's cool.
So the scenario kind of opens up with the opening, as we've kind of touched on it already, really, with the getting to the university, meeting with Greg, his famous lines for everyone to enjoy. But that gives you a nice tease of what's to come. Very Resident Evil-like, where you've got.
Do you agree with him, though, Nick? Do you agree that too much growth weakens an organisation?
Yes, I do. I'm Team Greg. I have to be. But then I do like Resident Evil Survivor. So I do like mass production for the tyrants.
That's what was great about that as well, because everyone who was into the lore, like we all were, we'd all played Survivor, and we obviously knew what Machina Island's existence was. So to have that actually referenced in another game just only added to what we said, in the previous episode. I don't know whether it was the last one or the one before. That like back then, you didn't have this in video games. You didn't have this multi-chapter universe where all these different entries contributed to a singular, narrative, and that's what made it great. It's just like for Greg, it's just a throwaway line in a multiplayer Resident Evil game. But if you knew the lore, you knew that singular reference of mass production meant something. And that's what made it exciting. It's what made this world feel so real. And
I think it's important because it's that kind of mass production element is never mentioned in Resident Evil 2. At that point, it was just another tyrant, albeit 103. I'm thinking whether because the TO78 from Code Veronica, that tyrant, that was the same as Mr. X, if you like, but a different one. So that was a potential hint at mass production, but it really was Survivor that nailed down the fact that lots of Mr. X's, if you want to call them that, TA103s, were made off-site. Unless, John, you can correct me in some of the old RE2, Biohazard 2 guides, I don't think it was really a thing until a bit later on.
What, the mass production thing?
Yeah.
Well,
it's 5. No, there is 5, isn't there? Of course, there's the drop, all of them, isn't there, in the canister?
Yeah, basically, once they got the combat data from the mansion incident with the stars fighting against the TO2, they applied that data to improve the control system for the T103. And then they were happy enough with that to sort of start mass producing it. And obviously that times quite nicely with Greg creating the Thanatos and getting pissed off because Umbrella obviously wanted to mass produce it. And he was like, no, piss off.
This is why we don't talk about the Ivans, though.
No.
100%, yeah.
But yeah, there was this program, and obviously Vincent Goldman with the Hypnos were sort of unique tyrant programs compared to the mass-produced T103 project.
But then what's quite interesting, you had the we're jumping a little bit into File 2 territory, but then of course you had the other tyrant, the TO400TP. I think that's right. That was obviously going on in Raccoon City as well, using basically a mass-produced tyrant as well. So, competition.
They're all fundamentally the same model.
Yeah.
But just, people are doing different things. Like the one in Code Veronica had its claws blunted down and was used as a training model. The Outbreak File 2 one was it was going to be used in a battle test against the Hunter Muse. So, yeah, there's lots of different modifications with them.
And obviously, Greg's modification is a very fetching pair of black Speedos.
Yes.
Indeed.
So would that Tyrant then, presumably it's not a 103 base, it was a different cloned version?
Well, I think it was just another unique subject, someone who adapted to the virus. It's obviously an African-American male, I would say, and that's why it's unique. It's its own thing. They're not going to clone it. It can't be duplicated. It's just a unique subject.
There's a bit, he's quite similar then to the perhaps TO1 and the TO2 from RE1 more so than the others.
Yeah, I mean, possibly. I mean, we don't know for sure because there was never really any sort of supplemental information about it. But, Greg obviously wanted to do his own thing away from the whole mass-produced thing, and he obviously thought it was superior to anything else Umbrella was doing at the time. But unfortunately, it didn't live long enough for us to see it properly.
It could jump higher. I'll give him that.
Yeah.
Jump.
Yeah, its agility was off the scale, and it's obviously got that sort of bandersnatch, extended hand attack. But yeah, it's a cool Tyrant for sure.
Onwards then, so the game opens up and you are slap bang in the middle of a main hall. Could you be more at home, is all I can say, in a main hall of a big creepy mansion, or in this case, a university hall. So I've already said I'm Yoko. Are we all Kevin again? No, Stars, you wouldn't have been.
How dare you, Nicole?
I know. Everyone was Kevin last time. I was like, oh.
Who was I playing as, Nick?
You're Alyssa.
Yes. every single time.
And was Alyssa helpful in your campaign?
I used my lockpicks once.
Oh, okay.
but don't forget, she's got a great dodge move and the pot shot ability like Kevin. So she brings a lot to the table, does Alyssa?
Good. Romby, what about you? Who did you pick in your mansion playthrough?
I went with the Yoko option this time because I knew it was a long scenario. So much like you outlined very early on, I was like, maybe this will be worthwhile for my approach this time, knowing that I'm just going to be slower and methodical at this.
Yes. I think we got an extra. I say this every bloody scenario. Do we get an extra scene as Yoko? I can't remember. No, I don't think we did. But we did on this one.
Yeah, this is the infamous moment where Greg implies that what happened to Yoko was so horrible that it's no wonder that you want to forget about it.
Yes, it feels. Yes, that's right. It's really stilted. It's like the end scene, the finish is fade to black. Then you come back for like another minute, if that, and then you get the shooting. That was it. That was weird. Yeah. Batman, Kevin for this, or did you pick someone else?
No, I just went with Kevin, and my NPCs were David and Yoko.
I had David and thankfully not Jim, who really screwed up for me one game. I had Kevin with me. So, yeah.
Same here, I had Yoko and Kevin.
So we're in the main hall and we're having a look around. It's. I think what's nice about the opening bit is that it's a huge area to explore, and you just get the beautiful graphics kind of coming in, and you kind of get that kind of Code Veronica-esque movement of the camera, and it just feels really nice to be exploring. And you quickly establish what you've got to do. You've got two main objectives. You've got to restore the power and to acquire the 2 gems for the moose about this hoose. So you are looking around for that. But it's one of those things. Did it feel like a university main hall in the slightest? And I mean, I don't think it did. I can't imagine any student ever walking into this.
It felt like a Resident Evil University main hall.
Yes, it did.
And that's all it needed to be.
We have university here. That there's a couple of them that have very old, ornate, singular buildings that do have maybe not the scope and scale of this, but do have the sort of halled mansion kind of like stairwell entrance, but they're usually much smaller than this here because they were built kind of in a Victorian era. So it's kind of weird. They're not used as main buildings now. They're quite often administration buildings and not main classes. So there's probably a few out there, but I don't know if they're very common in America anyway.
And in fairness, I think we only go in that one building. I think the university itself is huge when you see it from the outside.
Yes, that's true. So you've got the main hall, and you've got the elevator, which is your end goal, and then you're looking around and you see the moves. Did anyone think that it's not that clear what you need to do at the very beginning?
Absolutely.
And I think if there was a modern retake on it, it would be a lot more obvious what you need to do. You have to, and again, this is where I was pleased because I needed that little prompt just to get me going, finding out where I was going to go. You could spend, I reckon, half an hour looking around first floor alone, trying to work out what you got to do. And I don't think it's that obvious, even when you get into the moose. That's your kind of goal. And it's like, it's.
Well, I think it all depends how quickly you pick up the file in the Student Affairs office that talks about the moose gems.
Mm.
And then obviously you find it, and then there's that door opposite that you clearly can't get into. That's a decent enough hint, I think. But yeah, if you miss that particular file, then yeah, I can see where the confusion comes from.
But I'd argue that's no worse than the original.
I was just back that. It's like feels like it's a very much a throwback to the main hall of the original, where you kind of just have to start exploring until you pick up a path of where you want to go.
Because Barry's guidance, even if you're playing as Jill, is next to useless, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the only difference here is that you do have that, essentially the time limit, but that's the only difference where it kind of doesn't quite work into the same gameplay mechanic, because obviously you could take as much time as you wanted to in the original game, whereas you don't really have that luxury fully here.
You can go through the Student Affairs office, pick up the file. There's lots of antiviral pills scattered about, which I think are absolutely essential in this game. Yeah, in this scenario, you need find one, consume to keep that virus off bay. I liked at the beginning. There's lots of, especially around the inverted C corridor. I think it's called Passage A. There's homages to the original Resident Evil. You can push the cabinets out the way, and there's like ammunition underneath, and you get I think the dogs come in as well at some point as well. I found that quite nice.
I didn't know you could do that, Nick. There you go.
You can push the cabinets on the side. Yeah. And
there's an aid spray under one of them.
Very cool.
And you're right.
Perfect throwback.
I think if you go around it later on as well, the dog smashes through the window, which is a nice homage.
Lots of it. And then, I like that. And then you've got all sorts of puzzles. So the first I think the first puzzle you come across is on the second floor. But before you get to the second floor, you can explore, I think it's Passage B, and that's your first hint. And I will stress, it's a hint that you've got to pick up on that sparking electricity cable, and you can kill all your NPCs if you're not too careful, or at least not kill them, but severely injure them if they happen to be walking near the sparking, and you press the button on the side. I mean, that cool. But that again, you need that later for the tyrant to disable him. There is not a chance in hell I would have got that had I not read something to say lure the tyrant. I know I'm jumping ahead a bit. Lure the tyrant to that part and then hit the button. How are you supposed to know this?
I think it's just a question of running out of ideas. I seem to recall the first time I ever played this, the tyrant obviously jumps through the window and chases you around the university, and you run out of places to go. You think, right, how can I deal with this? And then you go past that corridor a number of times and you think, and then you just end up trying it. You're right, there's no direct hint, but what else? There's literally nothing else you can do, otherwise it's just going to chase you round and round and round.
Yeah.
You just didn't think like Nikolai, Nick. You didn't ask Thanatos to calm down. You must give me your blood.
President's room then, so that's up on the second floor. And that was the first first kind of puzzle, the clock puzzle. My notes here, and I think we've discussed this off screen, was no idea how this works. But Sean, you said, Nick, this is an easy puzzle.
Did you say second floor?
President's room, isn't it the clock puzzle?
The clock puzzle's on the first floor.
Oh, was it? Oh, apologies. Yeah. What's in the president's room?
You're thinking of the president's glasses puzzle, which opens up the secret door.
Yes, apologies, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, you're quite right. The clock puzzle then. Still,
right.
No idea. Explain.
Okay. So there's a file in the room. Basically, you need a 4-digit code that represents time. Okay. There is a file. It has 4 pages. Each page has a series of numbers on it. Look for the one number that, in its pattern, creates another number. So, for example, if the first digit that you need for the clock for your time, I think my time was 10:05.
Yeah.
So I need it. So in that first page, I think it was the numbers 4 went down in a single vertical column indicating a 1. On the next page, I think it was a series of 3s that ran round the pattern indicating a 0. It's so hard to describe without being able to point this out to you. But basically, there will be a number on each page that is repeated to create another number visually.
Visually?
So
it'd be so obvious, Nick, when you go back to it now.
Is it really? Honestly, I was like, it's even when I had the answer, I was like, I do not have a Scoobies as to what. Let me have a
think
look.
of it as like a word search, Nick. But within that word search is a single continuous number that makes up another number with its pattern.
Right.
So you've got a jumble of numbers, but one of the numbers will be consistent and follow in like a continuity to show a physical, like an indicator. It's so hard to describe it, but it's so easy. It's so fucking easy. Like when you look at it, and next time when you got this in mind, you'll go, "Fucking hell! How did I never see that?" Honestly.
But how did you know that?
It's literally spelled out in the file, Nick. It tells you on the last page, Nick. The hours are represented by the digit 4, I think. And if you go back to the first page, as Sean says, there's a string of 4s that represent the number 1. And then on the next page, there's a string of, is it 7s, which make up the numbers? Which make up 0.
Right.
And then on the very last page, I think it says the minutes are represented by 47. So on the third page, there'll be a series of 4s that make up a 0. And then on the last page, there'll be a series of 7s that make up a 5. And that's your 10:05. The most frustrating thing was forgetting to press the button on the wall beforehand, because I was inputting the right code and nothing was happening. And I thought, am I going mad? This is the right answer.
And is it random? Does it change on each go?
It changes, I think.
Yeah, difficulty level.
Rob, are you? Was this easy, or am I on my own with this one?
Yes, sorry, Nick, you're on your own. Nick mode strikes again.
Oh dear. I'll have to replay it. Now I know.
So just admit to the audience here, Nick, did you use your guide for this puzzle then?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like, what's the code? I was like, and it was like, I can't remember what it said either. Like it's 10:0 or whatever. And I was like, and I did try and look at it. I was like, it's just numbers on a page, and maths is not my strong point. It really isn't. And there
is no maths involved, Nick.
I don't know.
It's pattern recognition. That's all it is.
I'm not even great with patterns, and even I saw it. So it's comprehension.
I can't tell you the stress I'm under with this bloody timer and this viral gauge. I don't know how long this scenario is. I've never completed this scenario, and I'm faffing around with some file going, what's the bloody code? And I'm going, I don't know. I'm gonna look at the guide and get me out of it. I want to move on. Like I want to move on now. But yes, anyway, that you get a gem. Gets you a gem, so you're kind of halfway there. And then that's one gem. Where's the other gem?
Piano statue thing.
That's right, yes. Any problems with finding all this? I liked the upstairs, wasn't it? I liked some of the rooms were quite grandiose. So the president's room's quite grandiose, isn't it? And then there's did you get a zombie burst out one of them?
Yeah, comes out the cupboard, yeah.
Yeah, and you get
because of the camera angle, you can't see it. You just hear a big bang.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. And the art gallery, isn't it? Where the
rooms. It was all like when you sort of go and visit a stately home, and you can go in all these rooms, and they're all roped off. Kind of reminded me of that.
Yes, it's different. If you're playing as Cindy, you can play the piano till earlier on, but you've got that was it. If you then go to the president's room and pull one of the cards in the fireplace. Yeah, because again, slightly different playthrough if you're playing as someone else to get that
wonderful replayability.
Well, I think it helps. I wonder, is Cindy a good choice for that? I mean, it helps that little bit.
Cindy's a great choice at online, yeah, because she's the healer character. She carries the herb case, so the other players don't have to, really.
Okay, that's great. How many herbs can she put in there?
I think she can carry up to 3 of each.
Oh, okay, so that's quite good.
She has a herb case in it. They stack. So I mean, so people might correct me. It might even be more than that. But she also has abilities. I don't know whether this is a file 2 thing, so forgive me, audience, if I've got this wrong. But I know for a fact, like if you're in bleed status and Cindy holds you, then she can bleed status is cured. So if you're in like the stagger animation and she walks over and supports you, then as soon as she holds you, the bleed status clears. It might be a file 2 thing that, because I think her special item is the bandage. But yeah, she's definitely worth having. There will always tend to be some form of Cindy in an online game because she's just a good character to have.
Not many BOWs at this point in the game, really. I think you've only really encountered just zombies, dogs, maybe, if they can't remember when they actually come in. But it's all quite... It's like a slow build-up, isn't it? It's all kind of like slow and tense. You're doing a couple of these puzzles, and then you go to the moose and put your 2 gems into the moose, and then that activates a nice secret hidden... I don't know what, it felt like almost like a Wesker room, wasn't it? Where kind of watching and just a secret sneaky area in the main hall, because I think Wesker's rumoured to have a secret room in the main hall in the mansion. But yeah, you kind of go down there, that triggers another FMV, where you learn a bit more about... Is it Peter down there? You learn a bit about...
Peter Jenkins.
Yeah, that was it. Some atrocious voice acting. It felt like someone had phoned that one right in.
Yeah, he was obviously coerced by Greg to create the vaccine, Daylight, which, according to this, is the only vaccine. So Nathaniel Bard doesn't exist here. So it was quite an interesting sort of subplot between them two. There's quite a few juicy files explaining what's going on there. There's actually a really interesting piece of lore that you only get if you press the ad-lib button while you're in the main hall. And it basically, I think it only happens with certain characters. I think it's actually Alyssa, if I'm remembering correctly. But it basically says Raccoon University was expansively remodeled 4 years ago. And a lot of the researchers working there were subcontracted to Umbrella, which is basically explains why Greg Muller's got a lab in the basement and wears like an Umbrella shirt and is obviously growing a tyrant in there. So that was quite an interesting piece of lore, but easily missable because, yeah, you can only get it in the main hall if you press the ad-lib button at a certain time.
I mean, I guess it makes sense contextually for why there's all the material of the lab in there. Umbrella stuff.
Exactly.
You'd expect Umbrella to have some sort of hand in the university on some level, right? Just like they do about most other things.
Yeah.
So it ties in well.
Yeah, like the hospital in the RE3, they've randomly got hunter gammas in the bottom, because. And then their main hall, their main facility in Outbreak File 2. Interesting about the Daylight, of course, is that it randomly appears much later on in the series in Mahara Desire, which took everyone by surprise.
Nice callback, yeah.
Was there any explanation as to how that happened?
No, I mean, it's just a bit nonsensical, isn't it? Kind of forgetting all about the Will Farmer vaccine, but we know what this series is like for lack of communication between teams and stories. I would just put it down as an oversight.
A nice one anyway. If you get to read Mahara Desire, just having Daylight, you remember that. So this comes to the first point. Once you exit that, you can then go and turn on the power, and then this is your first decision whether you want to go up or whether you want to go down. And the choice is either the water treatment way or the emissions tower way. Batman, you said you went emissions tower on your completed run through.
Yes, initially I went down to the water treatment facility and, God, it was massive. It was a lot bigger than what I remembered, and I just remember getting hopelessly lost and climbing a ladder and somehow ending up back at the manhole where you find George, who, if he is not part of your team, he will be sort of sat on the floor dying.
Yes.
And then I got killed by the Neptune, so the second time I did it, I started from scratch again and went down to the emissions tower. I think that's the slightly shorter route. There's obviously no sort of swimming sections, no water sections. You don't come across any hunters. You do come across a couple of giant spiders in the drained waterways, and then obviously in the emissions tower itself is full of wasps, which are very, very irritating.
Don't get me started.
But it's interesting. On B4, you actually see Greg's lab, but you can't go in it. And then you obviously get on part of the subway tracks as well, which sort of links in nicely with the underbelly scenario. It's quite linear, this route, but there's a couple of little optional things you can do. Like you can avoid the wasps by going inside one of the wrecked subway trains I think you find an assault rifle in there. This section is almost identical to the Tall Oak subway bit in Resident Evil 6. And then when you get in the emissions tower itself, you have to turn on the power for the elevator so you can get up to the upper levels where you can get hold of the V-poison. And then you eventually end up in the yard of the university and you see the Nikolai scene with the UBCS. So that particular scene happens quite a bit later than it does if you choose the water treatment facility route.
Do you have any problems with the emission tower?
Just with the wasps, really. There's a couple of shortcuts you can take where you sort of balancing on a very narrow ledge and you've got to sort of slide across it, and a bit like the crows in Hellfire, the wasps can come down and knock you off, and they obviously cause you to be poisoned as well, which is irritating because there's not many blue herbs. There's quite a few cans of pesticide spray about, but it doesn't really help you. But it was quite straightforward, to be honest. The emissions tower, you can't really get lost. There's plenty of healing items, there's plenty of ammunition, a large quantity of antivirus pills, and you're not really overloaded with BOWs. There's only really a handful of zombies. I think there's only 2 spiders, and the wasps you're sort of better off trying to avoid, really. So I can't remember the water treatment route by heart. I'm sure you guys will go into detail, but this seems like an easier route of the 2, I would suggest.
And where do you go? Once you pick up the V-poison, you're then relying on your NPCs to have done the other route and pick up with the sealed...
The P-base.
The P-base, yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't remember. I got the V-poison and I got back into the uni and I went up to the 3rd floor to make the daylight because I thought that was where your partner was waiting, but obviously I got up there and Yoko was nowhere to be found, and I started to go down to the 3rd floor, and as you get sort of outside the university towards the dock where the Neptunes are, that was where Yoko was waiting for me, and that's where she had the P-base in her inventory.
Oh, okay. Because interesting, I never, ironically, I never encountered the Neptunes at all in my playthrough, which was a disappointment, really.
Well, yeah, either you don't have to go down to the dock at all.
No, but if you do, that's what triggers the early Nikolai scene with the UBCS. Yeah.
Yeah. So everyone else therefore did the waterway route.
Yeah, but I traversed the dock before I went down to trigger the Nikolai cutscene and got the blood straight away, so I didn't have it to do later.
What do you mean? So you weren't?
So before I went down the ladder to the waterworks, I went through the door near where George is laid. I then ran round the dock, avoided the Neptunes. Then you take a stone staircase up to the courtyard.
Yep.
And then that triggers the Nikolai cutscene early. So then I went back into the university, triggered the Thanatos sequence.
And I'm electrified and picked up
got the T-blood, banked it somewhere nearby. So then I knew once I'd done the water treatment plant, I grabbed the V-poison off my partner character, and then I've got all 3 items straight away.
I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, I did the same thing, but I did the other way that John did. So
yeah, you just grab the T-blood straight away and then just bank it somewhere. Just grabbing a random item nearby, and then it's there. You know, you've got it.
Because one of the UBCS bodies has got the key card that you can use to get back into the university.
Yeah.
So then I went down to the water treatment plant.
So that's really cool then, because you've got 3 components essentially to do. You've got V-poison, the base, and the T-blood, and you can do them in some kind of order that you prefer. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a Resident Evil game in a microcosm scenario.
So that online
situation called decisions.
Yeah, online then. Does that what is that? Sean, when you play it, is that what happens? Is someone
online? And I can't stress this enough. If you have a competent team that can do each of the areas on their own, this scenario can be basically completed in like 25 minutes. because once you've got the options before you. One guy will go down to the emissions tower, one guy will go down to the water treatment plant, the other guy will get the T-blood, and then you've got everything in 25 minutes. You just all arrange to meet up. And obviously, everyone plays with Discord now, so everyone's talking to each other. It's not like it used to be back in day when you had to use gestures and hope that when you sent someone on their way, they would complete their task, because if they fucking died with no headsets or anything like that, it was really hard to know.
You'd have to
You
go
would
off
just-
and explore when no one turned up.
Yeah, exactly. You'd be stood there with your tea blood going, well, where is everyone? And you'd
See, this
maybe phone them. You'd phone your mate going, right, I'm precariously balancing your chunky Nokia 3310 going, right, I'm at the elevator. Where are you? I'm fucking died.
Right, it doesn't matter that you
Died, mate.
precariously holding it. If it fell on the floor, it wasn't going to break anything.
Yeah, people don't know how
Like a
easy they
dent in
put
the
it,
floor.
See, that's like a microcosm then of how I always envisage this would be. You do that, you do that, you do that. Come back here, we'll meet, and then we'll crack on. That kind of thing. And so it's good that happened.
Because of the quite frankly stupid decision to not include any kind of decent communication beyond the ad libs and the gestures. You you had no idea back in the day if someone was successful. They just weren't. They just never arrived. But yes, online it's a great scenario online. You can choose to all do it together and go and do each section individually. That's also good fun because then you get to see everything.
Yep.
Or you just split up.
Is there enough time? I suppose if with three of you, there is enough time to be able to do it all.
Oh yeah, I've done it. The last couple of times I've done it online, we stuck together as a team the whole way. And in fact, I think the Heroes of Raccoon City stream I did with Sunny and JC, I think we did the whole scenario.
Really cool, really cool. So I think John's right, by the way. Looking at some of the maps, the waterways is huge comparatively to the emissions tower. But again, I really like this because we've seen a lot of kind of sewers and waterworks, and God, how many over the years. Resident Evil 1's had it, 0's had it, 2's kind of had it with the sewers as well, and that kind of thing. I like the feeling of this one, and it was it's a big open area, and there's lots to explore, lots of offices to explore, and there's like your kind of real first target is the management office where you've got that the sealant in there. I keep calling it sealant. It's not sealant, is it? It's the sealed. Sorry, it's the Regent case, isn't it? The sealed. That's what you're after, kind of getting a sealed Regent case, and it. If you examine the machine, it kind of says it's unsealed and things like that, and it won't hold. It's such a kind of clue. Things are just not laid out that clearly, are they? There's a room in there as well. You can't get into it. It's the water tank room, isn't it? And I suppose if you examine it, it says it's a red tag, doesn't it? There's a red light around it as well.
This is one of the drawbacks of playing the water treatment plant route because you've got to go one direction to go and get the key with the red tag.
Yes.
And run all the way back to open said door that needed the red tag to then unlock another door that then you have to traverse all the way back.
Yes.
It's forced backtracking in the worst kind of way, which, as John says, the emissions tower doesn't do.
But you are treated to a great FMV with the gammas.
Yeah.
I think it's really nice. When you get to that kind of big open area, seeing the gammas in their kind of natural environment, because you don't see a lot of it in Resident Evil 3, because they're only a little bit in the park, aren't they? I can't remember, is it water? There's a little bit of water in the park, isn't there? I haven't played it for a while now, but a lot of the time they just kind of jump out. There you go, fine, whatever. But here you can see how quick they are in that aquatic environment. Obviously, you see it a little bit more in Remake 3, but here's the opening bit. In my adventure, once you do the little shimmy across, I got very, very lucky that no hunter went for me. In fact, when I first did, I didn't even know that they could. It was only later in the scenario where one jumped up and went, "You little fucker!" I was like, "No," and somehow swam back to safety. But I assumed I was invulnerable, shimmying across the thingies, but alas, I was not. But no, I went across to the big one and then went up the ladder, and then you get to and that triggers the Nikolai tyrant battle. And I thought, oh my god, no, I haven't done anything yet. That was the first thing I did. Kind of went there and then up that ladder and then back down and then triggered that. And I thought, no, I've done something wrong. That can't be it. Because that's quite a unique thing, isn't it? Because you feel, that's the exit. You've got you can feel that's the exit, but you haven't done what you needed to do. but the option it gives you to go there, I thought was quite brave in that sense, that you could carry on exploring if you so wished. And now I know why, because as you said, Sean, because if you wanted to, you could go and do the T-Blood mission if you wanted to, which I didn't realise. So that's quite nice. So that's one way of getting there. But yeah, the hunters, how did everyone find them? You can avoid a lot of them.
I chanced it first. I tried to traverse the beam and got immediately knocked down into the water and nearly fucking died. There's a really annoying bit with the geography, trying to get around the railing of the steps to take you out of the water, and I just kept getting stuck on it, and then I kept getting grabbed, and then by the time I got out of the water, I was on danger and was not doing terribly well. Yoko had then also fallen into the water. She was on caution, so I knew I had to dispatch these hunters because one of us was going to get eaten. So I literally cleared the room and then went safely across. But they can be tricky. You are like you, Nick. You either get lucky and get across, and you think, "Well, that was easy."
Yeah.
Or you just get absolutely mullered by them.
Like I said, I didn't even know they could jump up and get you. I was like, this is fine. Yeah, I don't mind. And there's only when I was coming back. Thankfully, I was at the first shimmy or the second one if you're coming back, and it jumped up, and I was like, what the hell? I was like, swim, Yoko. And I was like, oh gosh, yeah, they're a lot more demanding in this game than they are in Resident Evil 3, I think. And I was not messing about with them. I had grenade launcher on them, taking them down immediately.
Not
messing
and they fall
about.
for that pretty well.
They do, yeah. Thankfully, there's a clue, isn't there, in the toilet? There's a grenade launcher which you can pick up. But I did find, certainly on my mode, there is a lot of health around. There's lots of first aid sprays. There's lots of green herbs and red herbs.
You're playing it on the easiest, right?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, there's a general amount of health, but I'd say playing on the easiest is...
Yeah, I mean, it's still a generous scenario on normal. It's not too bad.
Yeah,
but then to counter that, Rob, I'm playing with Yoko, who's very weak. So one attack from Yoko, that really damaging.
That is the truth.
And because up to this point I was quite comfortable, and then when obviously the hunters come up, and then they cause a lot of pain. At that point, I was like, I am in deep shit with the tyrant, because I had no idea I was going to do it.
Yeah, I was going to say because I went the other way, and so I ended up watching video to remind myself what the other direction, if I'd gone there first, was like, and. Yeah, I can understand that too, because there's a bit of random luck and jumping around and stuff like that.
Yeah, as Sean said, you kind of go back and forth into the room, and there is a save point in that office, which was very helpful to plan routes. But you go into the water tank to then get the...
Yeah, so you grab the key with the red tag, you then run back, go through that door and activate unlock another door.
Into the water tank, yeah.
Then you go all the way back, shimmy across again.
Yeah.
And then you grab the sealed container, then you jump down from the rail, the railing, the high office thing, and then you just escape and go back. Yeah, you have to go to that machine and get the P base.
The P base
container.
So what was the point of the other container in that room?
Just to trick you and waste time.
A trick you and waste.
You don't even need to pick it up.
No, little bastard. That confused me. I was holding on to that, and I was like, what am I doing with this? Because I think if you put it in the machine, it doesn't last long. I think you can use it.
It fills the container with the material, but after nearly instantly, it changes colour and tells you it's useless.
There is the optional route of the pier as well, which you can go down, which I didn't, and I feel I should have done for my namesake, just to encounter some Neptunes. But
it's very easy for the NPCs to meet their demise there, though.
Yes, yeah, you're quite.
That's what happened with me. One got eaten.
Will they go there on their own?
No. I don't really think so.
Because I did go in. I saw one. I thought, nope. We'll leave. But I didn't spend any time at the pier.
I will say this is where I encountered my first NPC death, though.
At the pier?
No, sorry, we're back with the P base.
Ah, right.
I'd collected the sealed container. We jumped down into the water, and there's a couple of gammas in that room specifically. And I tried to get Yoko out of the water. I was shooting gammas left, right, and centre. We'd dispatched one of them, but there was just another one, and Yoko's AI would just not come out the water. She just kept swimming aimlessly, and then it just fucking grabbed her and gobbled her up. Yoko at this point was carrying 2 assault rifles and 1 grenade launcher.
Ooh.
And though usually you can retrieve the body and grab the items, I don't actually quite know how it works once she's been gobbled by a gamma in the water. I don't know whether it shifts the corpse to a point where you can grab the items. I didn't stick around. I just ran on thinking, well, that's bust then. So I tried to save you, Nick. Yoko tried, but you got gobbled in my scenario.
I had my first NPC death very shortly afterwards. So once I got the P base, and I thought I was feeling very happy at this point. I thought I've done my bit, but apprehension was creeping in because I thought, what about the V poison? So obviously we shimmied out over the thingies and then up the ladder again. I'd already triggered the video earlier in my playthrough, but that was fine. So we're outside in the main hall, in the main kind of court dockyards area. It's a nice little bit, isn't it? I like the view over over the city, and you can have a bit look there. And this was the point. I wasn't really aware of what was going on with Kevin. It's just me and Kev. We're chilling, and picked up the card. And I gave the card to Kevin whilst I was sorting myself out. And I don't know what had happened because I don't know what he must have got hit by something or other. And we went over to the door to exit to go back into the university, use the car key. So I took the car key off him, and as I took the car key off him, he just died in front of me. He went ugh, as I literally took the card off him. It was really sad. I don't know if it suggested he'd been poisoned or something, but I have no idea why he just passed out as he gave me the card. It was like this last heroic act. It's like, you can have the card now. And then he just died on me right in front of the main door. I was like, oh, Kevin, no. And that's, so there we go. I don't know what could have possibly caused that. I'd imagine it was just the infection, but then if he'd hit 100%, he wouldn't come back as a zombie though, would he?
No, I think it's only the player characters that can come back as a zombie.
Right. Okay, that's fine. So yeah, so he had his hero's end, and it was very sad. And I was on my own at this point, as you would be. And then you go I went back into university and then do the Thanatos battle, and holy shit, we've already touched upon it a bit earlier. That is crazy, that part of the game. I said earlier I had no idea what I needed to do, and John, you said it becomes almost like a process of elimination. You're just kind of running around. But how good is that whole sequence, really? There's something about the music of Tyrant is incredible. And it's kind of like using. It reminded me a bit of the end music from Resident Evil 2, but I don't know. I tell lies. It reminded me of the Mr. X music from Remake 2, which presumably may have been inspired a little bit by that original music. It had that kind of like tension. Oh my god, I'm being moment, and you cannot outrun this thing. It is absolutely rapid across the room, and I thought it was fantastic. I don't know did anyone have any funny experiences getting out of the way, running, escaping, success?
I don't want to sound like that guy, but I'm too well rehearsed with this scenario now, so I can just line him up to the cable very easily and blast him.
But no, I mean, yeah, okay, but I mean, generally the whole bit. Did you like this part of this section of the game? It
was a perfect throwback to Nemesis.
I think it's harder than Nemesis, though. I think it's harder than Nemesis. He's quicker, but then I'm Yoko. I don't know if she's slower than the rest.
Yeah, Lister is faster than Yoko, so it wasn't. The problem is, at this point, I still had both NPCs alive at this point because I said I'd obviously done it first. So they were doing a pretty good job of just mantling about, doing their best to fight Thanatos, that I was just able to get away. I was actually stood at the control panel by the cable for a good 30-40 seconds, I would say, before the door finally opened, and a danger Yoko and a caution Kevin came mantling through the door, just getting bludgeoned and pushed over, and then Thanatos just ran for me, and I just hit the button, and then had to tend to my party's wounds because I think I had a mixed red-green herb that I gave to Yoko and a green herb that I gave to Kevin. It's just like, why am I the team healer here? Come on, guys, pull yourselves together. Fucking AI. Again,
I did have to look at the guide. There is not a chance on earth I would have worked out what I needed to have done without dying in a bloody fashion. I think I saved again, but by the time I got into the main hall and was starting to panic a little bit about what I needed to do, I quickly ran into the elevator room and used the save point there. So that helped me calm me down, because I think the last time I'd saved was in the sewers, and I didn't fancy doing the hunters again. So I used that as a kind of base, just as a kind of fail-safe in case it all went wrong. I think I ran around it 3 times before before consulting said guide, and says basically, remember that sparking electricity cable? Go there. I was like, oh, okay, right. So I ran there. I mean, I was taking so much damage; it was ridiculous. I can't. It's too quick, he's too quick for me. And I was waiting, I was like, how I'm going to get him. And he then just walked back through the door. He looked at me and now I see what you're doing. And then walked back. And I was like, you're joking. So I had to kind of then go back into the room. And then he wasn't there. And I was like, where's he gone? And then kind of creep up. And then he just suddenly appeared from behind me. I was like, it was quite an unbelievable experience of trying to lure this tyrant in, and it took 3 attempts, I think, to get it. And I was really worried after the first time, because the first time I did, I totally missed him because my eye coordination was all over the place, and I was worried that you only had 1 shot at it.
Do you have to wait a certain amount of time before you can do it again?
I think so. Because I missed it totally the first time. I had to run around. I wasn't going to wait around because he was right behind me. And so I assume you do have to wait a little bit, but I wasn't hanging around to find out. But yeah, first attempt was after that. I was like, no. Second attempt, he came up and went, he was having none of it. Third attempt, I finally got him. So that was exciting. Rob, any problems?
No, I mean, I remembered that there was the thing to spark, so when he turned up, I was like, right, I'm going straight there, and he followed me straight there. I didn't really have the issues you did, but I think the difference was that I remembered this.
Yeah.
One of the few things I remembered from this previously, so I had that luck. If I hadn't, then maybe my situation would have been the same as yours. So I'm not sure if it's a timing thing or if it's a exploring thing, because I think it's when you move around, it's like what happened with you where he turned up behind you. I think when you move through certain areas, it's not like so much of a timing thing. It's like where you go and when you have to kind of draw him back. But I could be wrong. It could be a timing thing. But I feel like it was more that you move around and he just randomly starts appearing, and it's more akin to that whole nemesis thing.
Yes, I'd like to see how he works off screen at all, because he did seem to be randomly appear where he wanted to, as opposed to him actually going on a particular path. I know it's interesting because when we first started doing these podcasts, looking back on Outbreak, I did have a saved file. And of course, this was for Decisions, because back from 2003 or whatnot. I loaded it up just to see where I was, and before doing it a redone. And I must have been, just to show you, I must have been about 45 minutes in, and I was still on the first floor of the university. So I was nowhere because I just didn't have a clue what to do in the first time, and I was just moping around. Yeah, so that just shows you that's how slow I would ordinarily be. But again, this game won't let you do that, but that's okay. Batman, you were okay, were you, with I think you said earlier, with the zapping?
Yeah, I didn't really have any issues with Thanatos at all, to be honest. It wasn't quite as imposing as I remembered. As you say, the music's cool, it's quite intimidating, but I think I managed to zap him first go without any real issue.
I'm going to make another confession. I had no idea I had to pick something up from him.
Oh, God. What did your guide tell you?
I tried not to look at the guide too much. It was only little bits. I was trying to do as much as I can. So I zapped him, and I was really happy with myself, I thought. But my mind instantly turned to the fact that now was the moment of truth as to whether David had come out trumps for me. So I left the Thanatos and whatever, and the T-Blood, I left it there, completely oblivious to the fact that I needed to pick the bloody thing up.
What was going through your mind then when you saw the Nikolai cutscene in the courtyard, when he shot the tyrant?
Yeah, this was cool.
And that was it.
Not that maybe that thing that's attached to him might be of use. Yeah. And that you just downed him and that you could pick it up. Yeah, no, fair enough. Nick mode again.
And the file, I think, that says you need the T-Blood, and that's in green, isn't it?
No clues at all, Nick. No
clues at all. No, it's just a child playing this game, I tell you. So I went, obviously, back to the elevator. This was the moment of truth. I'm not sure I would have done carried on had David not been there. And I've never been pleased to see David more so than I was when he was there, chilling out. And you run past the spiders, I think, because you get a little bit of what you experienced if you go the emissions tower raid, don't you? You get a little bit.
Yeah, you have to go down to the railway tracks.
Yeah.
And that's where your NPC character is waiting with the V-poison.
I had this really weird moment with the spiders. I mean, I I normally just run past them. But on the way back, either it was a graphical glitch or something, but I was climbing up. You climb up a little step ladder, and then the camera went all over the place with the angle, and I was stuck in I don't know where I was. It was like the whole screen basically went black and grey. And I was I was kind of caught off camera whilst the spider was coming up and hitting me with its venom, or spraying its acid at me. I was like,
well, that is an interesting glitch. That's going to be interesting to see.
It was really weird, and I was like, "Oh my god!" I can't do this. And I was just all I had to do. I was just pressing, directions, running in the camera, and suddenly I just reappeared, kind of back on where I was supposed to be. It was just a really curious moment that I came across, and I was genuinely worried I was going to be killed. It was almost like I was off screen. It was almost like the camera angle when it switched just paused as it did it. If you know what I mean. So I was kind of caught in between two camera angles, and I didn't know where Yoko was, and. No. Yeah, really weird. But yes, I was so pleased to see David. He was there just chilling, and I was like, "Oh, David, you ledge!" And he had the V poison, and I was absolutely delighted. So I thought I was doing quite well at this point, and I had the P base. I had the V poison. I'd survived what I had anticipated as being the clutch moment in this game, i.e. he not completing his bit. And so I was quite confident going back into the university. Going back in and then going up into the lab. And I think this is when reality hit me, when it says, I think you go to the machine and it says, you must insert the 3. And I was like,
This is classic Neptune. This is
and I was like, "What?"
Wonderful, Nick. Thank you. Can I just stop you, actually, Nick?
Yes.
You made a promise on the last fucking podcast. I've just thought about it now. I trust, as you promised, you engaged 60 hertz mode.
The silence is deafening.
I just can't believe this. No wonder it took you over like 2-3 hours to fucking do. Nick, I just don't know. My teachings are worth nothing to you, are they?
This clock code puzzle's just overloaded his brain, I think.
You didn't play on 60 hertz, Nick?
No, I will for Outbreak File 2. Remind me. Just please remind me.
I shouldn't have to remind you. You should have fucking come up with the option, and you went, "Oh yes, I remember saying on the podcast I was going to do this."
And it's the more sensible option to do for that game. He's just wanting a real throwback.
Extra line of resolution here. Yeah,
I'll take the slightly increased resolution with the speed slowdown.
You got it. But yes, so when I got to the machine and I inserted I think you can insert the 2, and then nothing happened. I was like, "Oh, what's going on?" And then the guy said, "And make sure put in your P base, your V poison, your T blood." I was like, "Oh, fuck!" So I had to go all the way back to go pick up the T blood and hope nothing would get me. So, thankfully, it was a clear route. I'd done my due diligence in removing any zombies on the way. But yes, an annoyance nonetheless.
So was the T-blood just sat on the floor, or did you have to zap Thanatos again?
I think it's just on the floor, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
it falls off, does it? Right,
yes.
Okay. I always grab it when the corpse is there, so I didn't actually know that.
Because it flashes, you see, to make it obvious that you have to pick something up.
Yeah, it's twinkling on the floor here, beside where the switch is.
Do you know what it is? I think I've become accustomed to my yellow paint, and if there's no yellow paint,
oh, here we go.
This is almost as bad as the remake book puzzle moment.
Oh dear Lord, dear Lord. Anyway, so with the T blood in hand, I'm now at a point where all you guys were. So we were good. We're inserting it into the T blood, and we make daylight. How many copies did you have?
What of
Daylight, yes.
I just made one extra copy for the ampoule shooter thing.
The damnedest thing here was I'd messed up in terms of moving backwards and forwards between the rooms because I'd forgotten to turn the power back on for the daylight machine. I knew I had to do the door unlocks, and then when I went back to the daylight machine, it wasn't working. So then I knew I then had to run back to Greg's PC, and at this point, Kevin, who was the only survivor, went into like the emergency passageway and didn't come back. And I couldn't spare. I knew I needed one daylight for myself, so I did one rotation. And then I needed to take a daylight into the boss fight. But I didn't have enough inventory to take one for Kevin, so he unfortunately did not have one. So I just took 2. I did one for myself and one for my inventory.
Interesting. I had 3, one for me, and I've never felt more happier about the removal of something from a screen than that being cured. I was like, at last, I am free. I then had I knew I needed one for the end, and then I went over to I went over to David, and he died before I could give it to him. It was so sad. He had survived this whole time, and I was, it was in the room. What is it? I don't know where he was. He ran in the next room or something like that, and I was about to come over, and he died. He just fainted on next to me. I was like, no, David, no. So he died. This is my second NPC death there, just as he's about to be cured.
Maybe he died of old age, waiting for you to get the tea blood.
Yeah, imagine if you just got the tea blood to begin with, you probably would have saved him.
I think you're right. But I like to think they died. Well, they did, both of them, both of my NPCs. I love them to bits. They died saving me, so I was very happy with that.
Well, that doesn't mean anything to them. They did. This is the point where I have to say, before I got to this point was where I last saved, and then intended to pick up the game again earlier this week, and then got an eye infection. So I've only watched the remainder of the game that I didn't get to play to catch up, so I can talk about it. So after this, I don't have an answer for you on how much I made, or
it's right at the end though. You're quite at the end.
Yeah, it wasn't that far off the end. Like I'd gotten the bits I needed and had just saved, and I was like, I'll come back and finish this. It wasn't going to take me that much longer. And then,
but going back to what we said earlier, you do get the cool scene. You do get the cool scene with Nikolai, because it shoots him basically direct down through the head, out of his jaw. As you said, it's very violent. And very brutal, but very cool at the same time.
Because I've had to make that scene to fit for all the character scenarios, it's very odd that you get no reaction shot from the person that he's talking to. It just seems very weird that they didn't have even just a sound effect that would work for each that just played depending on which character you picked, where you just hear them go, oh, or like shock, some sort of reaction. It plays quite comically because of that.
Farewell. Almost time.
But that's kind of it, really. Once you've kind of done that, you're home and dry, and then you're off to face Thanatos. But before you do that, did someone have it in for me and my characters? So at this point, I was very happy with my progress. I was mourning the deaths of David and Kevin, but I was feeling good. I had a daylight, I had a grenade launcher, plenty of rounds, and I was, plenty of ammo. I think about 104 handgun ammo rounds, so I was very well stocked. And then I met the wasps. And frickin' hell, did that, out of everything in this scenario, did those 3 wasps in the courtyard, they absolutely nearly ended me the entire game, and I was furious.
Why wouldn't you just go through the door?
They wouldn't let me get anywhere near it. I didn't know which door I needed to get through. I was it's a big area to explore. There's lots of potential, and of course you can go back down. Because I first went the wrong way back to the pier. I didn't know I was going. I didn't know I was going that way at all. And on every 5 seconds, these things were coming down, and I was getting poisoned, and I had to go find a blue herb. I don't do blue herbs in these games. I don't carry them around with me or anything like that. I didn't know I was going to encounter any wasps at all, because I thought, they're in the emissions tower. That's why I'm going to avoid them. And then, honestly, these 3, I used up all my health with these because they absolutely obliterated me. And my shooting, I went proper stormtrooper. I was like, missing them at every given opportunity. Honestly, they took me out so much. And by the time the last one was done, I was on orange caution. I had all my ammo. I still had my grenade launcher. I wasn't wasting grenade launcher, but I down to like 50 bullets, used up half my bullets, and I had no health left. Unbelievable the problems these 3 wasps caused. And it nearly ended my entire run. The most difficulty I've ever had in the entire scenario. Without a shadow of a doubt. The 3 wasps, I can't tell you. That's why I don't do the emissions tower. So I give you congratulations, John, for doing that.
Cheers, pal.
Nick.
Yeah, in that vast courtyard, I fail to see how three wasps can give you that much trouble. To be honest,
Yeah, I'm the same. Like I would you just run back and forth, right? Like I'm not. I didn't play this bit again, but I remember. As soon as you're talking about this, I'm like, I remember playing this previously, and I've seen it. You just dodge back left and forth until you get to the door you need to go to. Like,
yeah, no. And to be fair, I worked out their attacks. They have a very distinct kind of fly, stop, down.
Yeah, and you can kind of react and kind of dodge below it sometimes. So,
God.
But I would just run away and dodge left and right.
Before we just go on to the Thanatos battle, I just want to do a quick shout out to Mr. Gutsy, who after the last episode did actually come back and say how the AI work offline. The game does track locations and is attempting to simulate player behavior in the game's memory. When they're not in the same room as you, they are programmed to periodically take damage and pick up items randomly from a pool of items that have spawned in the scenario, excluding the key items such as card keys, door keys, or scenario-specific items. You can view this behavior offline using an emulator using a community-made tracker tool. So that's kind of cool to know that the game doesn't have them physically running around the locations. There's basically like a numerical probability that occurs when they're off screen, beyond the obvious trigger points that we've seen in this scenario, where they are destined to turn up with the V poison or the P base, depending on which route you take. I have, however, had offline playthroughs where the character is not there when they should be. I don't know whether it's because I've fundamentally broken something within the scenario or caused a trigger point to not happen, but there has been only 1 or 2 occasions where I've had to do the entire scenario. But yeah, just wanted to throw that in before we get on to the climax as such.
That is interesting. I was fortunate that the next room you go into was that kind of long corridor outside. Is a bit of a replenish your stock moment, isn't it? And health. I was fortunate in that sense because with this, you leave a lot of items, but they're a long way away at this point, especially in the waterways. I didn't fancy going back, countering more hunters, just to pick up a couple of green herbs. So I did chance it. But trying to think what I was on, I think I went from pre-wasp, I was at 35% infection. And then post-wasp, I was up to about 55, 60. Honestly, it was brutal. It was brutal, that 5 minutes of pain. Anyway, but we survived, and we then get to it's in the yard, isn't it? It's like there's a couple of they're trucks, so they're trucks you can climb on, and I don't think I got everything because I think if you jump down, that seemingly triggered the boss battle, but I think there's some more items I could have actually picked up, but yeah, it was good. It was good. You come down and then you have this battle with Thanatos, and he's kind of running around like a headless chicken. And this is where, Sean, I think you've said before to me, this is where you can get your daylight, can't you? In the locked cupboard.
No,
not here, because I will hold my hands up.
No,
I didn't. I never got I never used my spare daylight in the end.
No, because it's not in this. It's not in this battle. This is the first Thanatos big boss fight, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. It's not. You don't use the daylight here.
Oh, no wonder. Because I was looking around. I knew you had to, and I was looking around, going like, "This is where there's a random hole in the ground that you."
There is. That's what you use if you're taking them on with a knife. You can exploit some iframes here, and
I wasn't doing that. I wasn't.
No, what you're talking about, what you're referring to, is just so if you're thinking about it from the point where you are coming from the courtyard, so you've climbed the truck, you've dropped down from the diagonal parked truck, the flatbed trailer thing. You've dropped down from there. You've gone into the hole. You've gone across the hole, up the other side. Just past the scaffolding on the right is a locked container, which you can only open by shooting it or, unleashing damage upon it. And within that container, it's like a locker, like a big locker kind of thing. and within that container is a rocket launcher.
Right, I never got there. I never got anywhere near that. Well,
The rocket launcher will kill this Thanatos in one hit.
I was looking for it. I couldn't see it.
It's cunningly sort of concealed behind a very specific camera angle, but once you get right up to it, you'll get a new camera angle that will show you it in, you know, and obviously how to open it. It takes 1 grenade round on normal, I found.
In my playthrough, Thanatos, it looked like he got a little bit stuck in the hole. I don't know if he did, but I took full advantage of him being in said hole and blasted him quite significantly. That tactic worked quite well.
What weapon were you using at this point?
Grenade launcher.
Cool. You are exploiting the game's mechanics well, Nick. Then
was I? Well, there we go.
That's what you're supposed to use the hole to your advantage. Absolutely.
So I was doing quite, and this is where I got. As I said, I've never completed it before. It's the first time I was doing it. So I was blasting him, and then as I walked to try and find said rocket launcher, the credits started to roll. What it looked like, the credits started to roll, and I don't know. I assume this is normal. This is what should happen. Yeah, and so have I done it? And I thought that can't be it. There's nothing. I didn't even see him die, and so I thought, okay. So I don't know what I did to do that. I still don't know what I did to trigger the credits.
Your NPCs will have done the work then, but basically,
no, they were dead. They were dead at this point.
Oh, okay.
I don't know because I was kind of firing him off screen because of the way the camera angles are working. I was kind of firing into the screen, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, his death animation does take a few seconds. What basically happens is he drops to his knees, and then I think
so perhaps he did
forward. But this will take a specific amount of time. It's not instant. As soon as you inflict the killing blow on him, you don't immediately smash cut to credits. There is his death animation as such, and that could have taken a prolonged amount of time for you, I guess. Or was he still running around?
No, he was kind of like he was doing a classic kind of Nemesis, kind of stuck in the hole, running, if you like, you know, that kind of thing. And I was blasting, but this wasn't the first fight. This was the first fight, not the second one. Not in the university hall.
Yeah,
so
but he still has a death animation during the first fight.
Oh, okay, right.
Where he drops to his knees very slowly, and then falls over.
Perhaps it did because I was shooting him where I couldn't see him. Perhaps that's what happened. I'd hit him enough times.
No, that's what I've done it. Yeah.
Because I was very confused, but that doesn't surprise anyone. What was going on? I suddenly thought I'd done it, and I was quite happy with myself. What about you, John? How did you get on in this part of the battle?
It was okay, actually. I was quite lucky. I had Yoko with me at this point, and Thanatos seemed to focus more on her. And what weapons did I have? I had a machine gun and the grenade launcher, so I just kept running around and just blasted him, really. I was taking advantage of that big sort of jumping attack he has, where he jumps off screen because you know precisely where he's going to land. So I just kept turning and shooting him, so I didn't really have too much trouble at this point. It was more the inventory issue for me, because obviously I only had 4 slots. So I had to, because I had 2 daylights, I had to sacrifice my healing items so I could carry more weapons. But the only sort of point where I nearly died was a bit before this, actually. It was actually escaping from the university because I forgot to switch the daylight machine back on when the countdown started. And I forgot to then... I had to go back and do that, come back. Then I had to go back and unlock the doors. And then I couldn't remember how to get out. Because you go back to the elevator and that's not working. And then for some reason I had it in my head you could drop down that big hole that's in the floor. But you couldn't do that. And I was running round and the countdown got down to about 2 minutes by the time I found that other door in the room where Greg gets killed. So by the time I got out of the university, I had about 30 seconds left. But in terms of the actual boss battle, it was quite straightforward. I think it would have been harder if I was there on my own, but because I had one player character with me, Thanatos just sort of focused on Yoko and I was just free to shoot him.
You know, you are right about that door. Again, unless you run to a particular point, you do not see it, do you, in the lab?
Yeah, I mean, I was panicking because I was running around for a good 2 or 3 minutes thinking, well, where the bloody hell do I go? You know, I was searching that room where the hunter bodies are hanging on the chains, thinking, but luckily, I eventually found it in time, but I was starting to panic, I must admit.
Great piece of environmental storytelling as well, those hunter cameras.
Yeah, and there's a single UBCS body on a gurney. And if you examine it, I think he says he's been entirely drained of his blood, which I thought was quite interesting.
Nice. The credits start, but then it's a bit of a false start, isn't it? You end up back in the yard, and then you're in a very small square where you're fighting fighting the tyrant again. He's mutated. He's lost an arm, and he's now royally pissed, I think is probably the best way of describing it. And he's got these big, powerful jumps and slashes. And this was tricky. I am pleased. So this is a boss fight where I am just pleased I had the 8 inventory slots, because I don't know how anyone else could do it. But because thankfully I was able to, before I got to this point, I was able to suitably restock, and I came in with at least in total 4 full heals, if you like. So there's a couple of first aid sprays you can pick up. I think I had a red and a green that was in the main hall where the wasps nearly killed me, and I think I was able to backtrack a little bit and get some more green herbs. But I had 4 full health, and it's so small, the area. It's quite a challenge, especially with the tank controls. It's you got to be quite nimble on your fingers to get in there, and you can do the quick turn, but it's still quite, you can easily get clobbered and stun locked into particular bits. I'm thinking where the gate is, I think, is quite a bit of a nasty area if you're not careful. But I'm pleased to say I had enough grenade rounds, and there's another first aid spray and herbs, isn't there, in that whole area? All of them used, and this was challenging because I needed to mix the green and the red whilst in mid battle. And of course, in this game, you can't pause it and do it. It all has to be done live, making it even more tricky. But I did it with caution to go, no health. So I was quite pleased. But apart from one potential near stun lock, I was okay. And in fact, that was the one that I thought I was stun locked, and then blasted him, and that triggered his demise. But I never got. I exited with daylight in hand, so that's how it appears in Mahara Desire. That's canon, because Yoko took a sample out.
There you go.
Sean, any problems? You're a seasoned veteran with this. What's your tactics?
I mean, going back to the previous battle, I had a colossal, monumental fuck up.
Oh.
So I made my way to the rocket launcher container. I had a grenade launcher with grenade rounds. I think I had 9 in total. I fired one into the container. The door shattered. It fell down. I grabbed the rocket launcher. Kevin was doing his really good job of battling Thanatos. I lined up the shot, and just like I was on a stream to all of our beloved listeners, I fucking missed.
Classic.
The rocket went sailing past Thanatos, and I could not believe it. Because this is the kind of thing that used to happen on stream, isn't it? You remember I would be doing
all the time.
successful run on Resident Evil 2, and I'd get to the 103 battle, and I'd miss the first shot, and it's like, this has never happened offline, ever. What is going on? And yet this time it did happen offline, because the rocket went sailing past Thanatos, and this is a one-and-done rocket launcher. If you miss, you fucked up. So I then had to do battle. Thankfully, the grenade launcher did fell him quite quickly. Get the credits, go into the final section, and again, it's a well-rehearsed routine by now, Nick, but on one of the tanks is, I can't pronounce this, is it ampoule shooter?
Yeah, ampoule shooter, yeah.
You load the daylight in, but it's basically like a needle gun, Nick. It's just a little needle gun, like a little tranquilizer gun that you see. You combine it with the daylight, you shoot Thanatos once, and you get a very special cutscene of him dying.
I never saw that.
So basically what happens is you hit him once, and the FM, it's an FMV, it's actually a dedicated FMV, just shows like light emerging from his body, and it just starts to like dissolve and eradicate him. It's a cool little scene.
So I made my fight artificially harder again.
But that's one of those things. I mean, I'm surprised your guide didn't tell you this, because
it did. That's why I had the daylight with me. It said save a daylight for the final boss fight. I was like, okay. I never. I thought you put it in the rocket. So it said, the rocket launcher. I thought it was to go with that for some whatever reason. I don't know what I was thinking.
Yeah, once you load it up and hit the Thanatos, it's good. Do you need a daylight in your inventory to finish to get the best ending?
Oh, please tell me yes, because then I'll be happy, because I did get the good ending.
When you said it, I wasn't sure whether you were actually onto something there. I wasn't sure whether you needed a daylight in your inventory for the best ending.
I can't remember, to be honest.
What ending did you?
It's kicking me. I think you're potentially onto something here, Nick.
I know if you're infected and you don't have the daylight, you get the special ending where you just stay behind, don't you? And you watch the missiles come and obliterate everything. That's pretty cool.
Decisions is very cool in that, depending on your character and partner combination, you get some very amazing sequences that are actually better than the game's like alleged good endings. Because like there's a really good one where is it Kevin and David decide to have a final stand against Thanatos. Thanatos actually gets up, and there's a really good scene of like, you know, David and Kevin loading up and
That's right, yeah.
doing battle one last time. I think there's a good one with Mark where he gets one of the tanks going, and he sits in the gunner seat or whatever as Thanatos gets up and they go to battle. Cindy and George's is a really melancholic, emotional one where they just sit on a park bench and just acknowledge the fact that they're going to die, but at least they're together.
Yeah.
Really, really cool scenes.
Listen to this, guys. In order to get the best ending, this is from Neo Seeker. There we go. In order to get the best ending, wait for the machine to spit out 5 daylights.
Mm-hmm.
Two for your partners, 1 for you, 1 for the Thanatos fight, and just keep the last one in your inventory and don't use it, and you'll end with the Hope Remains ending.
Nick.
Whoa! There we got it.
At the 11th hour, you've pulled it off. You got a better ending than the rest of us then. Unbelievable. So what's the Hope? I need to look up what the Hope Remains ending is then, because I've not seen that for a long time.
Well,
I suppose that's an allusion to the vaccine being mass produced, is it?
That's a harsh penalty, though, that is, because that means you're taking barely anything into the final fight.
There's an ending, there's an ending as well if you don't use it on yourself as well, but you manage to escape and you end up killing the people in the helicopter.
Yeah, that's right. You become a zombie, don't you? Yeah.
It's amazing. Honestly, if people haven't, look up these endings on YouTube, because some of them are really well done. Like some of them are actually like quite emotionally, powerful. Really good stuff.
The 2 firemen are the same from Hellfire as Outbreak. Sorry, no, Hellfire. Yes, apologies. The end of Hellfire. Danny and Jill. Yeah, which is nice.
Nick got the best ending. My God.
I mean, it was weird that there was a random fire RFD helicopter floating around at that time of day. Let's judge the elephant in the room, and I'm talking about the angels and the end sequence with the multiple strikes on Raccoon City. This was always a very, very weird discussion and a source of conversation in many forums, back when they were popular. How is this an error, or does one like to retcon the idea that perhaps the angels came in first and did some bombings, and then the big nuke, and then the thermo-bombarding bomb went off, or whatever it was? Or is it just a mistake that we've just got to accept that they just got that wrong?
Well, it doesn't need to be that either. It could be a case where they looked at it and went, in order to destroy a city of the size, maybe it wasn't going to be big enough, so they kind of had to quasi-retcon it in order for it to make more logical sense. Because they might have thought maybe 1 wasn't big enough to eradicate everything, and they wanted this kind of scope and scale thing. But who knows?
I think it's just an oversight, personally. I just think it was creative vision. I don't think it really matters. It's just a continuity problem.
Yeah.
Stylistically, it has its own look as well, like it adds to, especially with some of the other endings.
Yeah, it's probably just a dramatic thing for this particular game.
I mean, it's certainly powerful, and with the music and everything, it works really well.
Oh, yeah. It's just weird, considering you've had 3, and, at this point, the single bomb was very well established in the lore.
Because in the ending, you do actually still see the singular mushroom cloud, as if it was just the one missile again, which is weird in itself. But then obviously in the epilogue, you do see the blast zone. You can clearly see there's
multiple craters.
Yeah.
And that's quite weird. So is there a date for that? This kind of what you can
months, isn't it?
Fly over and...
Yeah, it's like April 99. It's 6 months later.
The guy says it's been 6 months, but the results are still the same.
And what are they doing? They're testing the crater of Raccoon City for signs of BOW.
They found life.
They found
Yeah.
It's not been followed up since, though, has it?
No.
But they were quietly forgotten.
It's a little plot point. That was finished.
So during the final Thanatos battle as well, Kevin finally succumbed. He was he was knocked to the floor, and he actually died, I think, from the virus claiming him, because he was crawling around as I was fumbling around with the ample shooter. And then literally as I did, I actually saw both animations sort of take place at the same time. The Thanatos animation of him sort of dropping to his knees occurred at the same time Kevin expired on the ground next to him. So it was awful, really. Kevin had been my support all the way through in terms of combat, and I let him down at the 11th hour. But at least it was to a great piece of music, which was Third Time's the Charm, which is an amazing piece of boss music if you enjoy listening to the music of Resident Evil. So yeah, I ended the scenario as a sole survivor.
Well, the music for Outbreak generally is certainly one of the series' high points. Absolutely superb from beginning to end. So that is it, ladies and gentlemen. That is our playthrough of Resident Evil Outbreak Decisions, and of course the entirety of Resident Evil Outbreak to celebrate 20 years since the game was released. Let's kind of end it with a general overview of Outbreak File 1 then. I think it will be in terms of how we are all feeling having replayed it. I think Sean aside, most of us haven't really touched it that often, and so since the game came out, I think we've all been quite open and honest with ourselves. And Sean's got the benefit of playing a lot of it online, so he's a bit of an aficionado with it. How is everyone feeling now? With because we're going to be looking into Outbreak File 2 later in the year, and going back through those scenarios, because obviously they're going to be 20 years as well. Has your opinion changed on Outbreak, even in offline mode? Do you think it better than it was before you played, or still about the same? Batman, what about you?
I found it an enjoyable experience overall. I've played it, several times throughout the years, but admittedly, I haven't touched it. I think the last time I played Outbreak in any great detail would have been 2013 when me and Sean did our series playthrough back in there. But no, I enjoyed going through it again. It wasn't quite as frustrating as I remember. The virus gauge in all 5 scenarios really didn't really cause me any problems at all. The item management was probably the most stressful thing. And certain scenarios like Hellfire, I always remember as being really bland and just unenjoyable. But going through all 5 of them again and looking back on them now with fresh eyes, it's a really good Resident Evil experience that I really would recommend to anyone. So yeah, I've very much enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to going through File 2 at the end of the year.
Rumby, what about you?
I'm kind of the opposite, but not in a bad way. I've never really gelled with Outbreak the first time. I can't say that I was massively enjoying going through this again now. The issues I had with it back then still tend to be some of the issues I have with it now. I just never found it quite as fun as everyone else did, as much as I like especially now the nostalgia throwback in some respects. But it was good for all the good reasons and frustrating for all the frustrating reasons, the same as I remembered it. So it was very much interesting to come back to it, and I haven't touched it for near on 20 years. I think probably 2005 maybe I would have been the last time I'd played it. So it's been interesting in that regard, and I'm still kind of curious about File 2. Like, I won't be that enthused either, but I'll still do it.
For me, I'm kind of halfway between both of you. Actually, I didn't find the virus gauge as annoying, because I think I've probably come a little bit better at the games, believe it or not, than I have, and so I never got close apart from the Hive, which that really, really wound me up. But again, that was down to just silly mechanics, like Rob mentioned. That there's annoying factors in it that if they just weren't there, like the crawling factor's just a pain, and then there's little bits that I would 100% improve, but some factors I haven't found as annoying. So some of the delays I haven't found, and the loading as bad as I thought it was, and I was able to tolerate a lot more of the, a lot more of the scenarios than I did. So, and I was pleased with myself that I was able to actually complete decisions. So I've come into it with a little bit more enjoyability, should we say? And I am looking forward to Outbreak File 2, but I am mindful of the fact that there's scenarios in there that are troublesome. Flashback, I think, is going to be a pain. End of the road, I'm not looking forward to as much, because again, it's another lengthy one. So that may need a little guide to make sure I can get to the end. But overall, actually, they've gone up in my estimation, certainly, and they've improved in my eyes. I am desperate to play it online, and that will be my goal in the next couple of years, to try and get a new computer that will be able to tolerate it. But yeah, so overall, a great, worthwhile experience. And I'm pleased we did this happy birthday, Star podcast for it. It was good to go back. Stars, I'm sure you're going to wax lyrical about it anyway, but you can have the final say.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion hasn't changed at all replaying it. The only thing I wanted to do for myself was for the purposes of the anniversary episode that we're doing now, the episodes we've covered it, I wanted to play it offline, so it was exactly as the experience that I had back in 2004, and it wasn't too bad. I mean, it's an infinitely better game online. I've said it enough, there's no need to cover that again, but once you know how to micromanage the AI a little bit, even your partners aren't terrible. They're not great, they're not even good, but you can do it with rehearsal and repetition. You'll get yourself to a stage where you will know what you're doing, you will know what your AI partners roughly can do, and you can exploit that to whatever varying degree. I just think the game's a great celebration. I think Outbreak 1 is a considerably better game than File 2, I must say. File 2 has a lot of quality of life improvements, but I think the scenarios pale to the...
It's interesting.
Just how well they put together these 5 here. Decisions is a series highlight. I said this to you guys offline the other day, that I don't just find Decisions a good slice of Resident Evil Outbreak. I find it one of the best slices of Resident Evil altogether. Across the series, I think Decisions is a truly wonderful slice of Resident Evil. The fact that it has every sort of core element that makes this series great in an hour 30 experience is truly wonderful. The production values hold up very well. We've all, beyond you, Nick, I assume. What did you play this on, Rob? Were you on hardware or emulator?
No, hardware, PS2.
Okay, so the
PAL version offline.
2 of us have played it on emulator, 2 of us have played it on the hardware. The game holds up visually, I think. Whatever it is you're playing it on. It just, I suppose the final point I just want to end with is it just was a game, it was just too early. Like, the world wasn't ready for what Capcom were trying to do with this game, and that will be, unless we get a remaster or a remake or whatever, that will be Outbreak's legacy. It was a game that just existed in a world that wasn't ready for it. I love it dearly, though.
On that note, we will end our discussion on Decisions and Resident Evil Outbreak File 1 as a whole. So we thank you everyone for listening, but we have time for a quiz.
Fuck you this time, Nick. I've got 2 things written down here. I'm cheating again. If these don't come up, I'm going to kill you.
Oh, I'm not sure they will. Right. That does conclude our look back at Resident Evil Outbreak File 1 and Decisions with these positive words from Stars Tyrant. But we do have time for one more thing. It is now time for Neptune Biohazard Quiz.
Do you know your G virus from your C virus? And your Jabberwock from your Bandersnatch? Or perhaps the number of bombs that appear on the Made in Heaven vest?
Jesus Christ. What fucking question is that?
I'm getting a big fatty eye this week.
Yeah, I'm not going to get any of these.
We've talked about the games straying too far from the origins. This Resident Evil quiz. We're now getting Spice Girls as the correct answer. I mean, it's time to quit.
This is Neptune Biohazard Quiz. Batman. Stars Tyrants. George Trevor. Robbie McGregor. Mr. Spencer. Neptune Biohazard quiz.
Welcome, one and all. 5 questions. We've had one submitted from one of our patrons. Clear your desktops. You can open up Notepad. Here we go. Various mix of questions from Outbreak, from Decisions, and elsewhere. I think you should do okay. So here we go. Question number 1 was, what are the spectacles made from that you need to add to that statue? Question number 2, what is the name of the battle plan undertaken by Nikolai? Question number 3, what are the only 2 types of rounds available in Outbreak in total for the grenade launcher? 2 types of rounds, what are they? What are they called? Question number 4 comes in from Jordan Osiris. We're taking a detour away from Outbreak over to Remake 4. So in Remake 4, what caption is inscribed on the bonus content Sentinel 9 pistol? Ridiculous question.
Once more, please.
Yeah. What caption is inscribed on the bonus content Sentinel 9 pistol? You get the Sentinel 9, there is something inscribed on the pistol. Because of that, question 5 is a little bit easier. Which arm has the Tyrant lost? Which arm has Thanatos lost? So there are the 5 questions. Join us after this one. We'll run through those answers.
I can't leave now that I'm infected. I've chosen to stay behind. What an idiot.
Let's see how well everyone has done. Question number 1 was, what are the spectacles made from that you need to add to the statue? Romby, we'll start with you.
Brass, I believe.
Brass. Stars Tyrant?
I have written brass.
Brass?
Brass! Nick, you southerner.
Brass.
Batman?
Yeah, brass.
Brass.
Brass. Got the brass glasses.
Did you say glass or glass, Nick?
Glass. Regional dialects.
Too many A's. Yeah.
Too many A's. Correct points all round, despite some accent differentiation. There we go. Points around. Yes, the brass spectacles are the item. Question number 2. I think Batman mentioned it earlier. What is the name of the battle plan undertaken by Nikolai? Stars Tyrant?
Emperor's Mushroom. I had it written down right here. It's one of the 2 things I'd written down, and then when John said it earlier, I thought, I fucking got this. I've got it, guys. Fucking got it.
Anticipated. Romby, what did you put?
I couldn't remember, and I forgot that John had even said it. So now that Sean said that, I'm like, yeah, now I remember this, but I didn't write anything down.
Batman, do I even need to come to you?
Yeah, Emperor's Mushroom.
Correct, yes. Points there to Stars and Batman. Well done, Sean, for anticipating a question. Very good.
Well, the other thing I'll tell you, because it's not relevant, the only other thing I wrote was C2 plus extractor, which is in another file.
Question number 3. There are 2 types of rounds available for the grenade launcher in Outbreak total. What are they? What 2 types of rounds? Batman?
I don't know. I'm going to say explosive rounds and acid rounds.
Stars Tyrant?
I believe they're just called acid and grenade.
Romby?
I've got acid. I assumed the other one was like grenade or something like that, but wasn't 100%, so I'm saying grenade.
Saying grenade. It's half points for everyone. It's acid and burst rounds. Burst round. They are grenade rounds. But they're not.
It is, yes.
I think I've used that before in a question similar, where I've said name all the rounds and grenade rounds. So the burst rounds is what everyone always forgets, and it's proven to be the case once again. Question number 4 came in from Jordan Osiris and is very tricky. So what's inscribed on the Sentinel 9 pistol? Stars Tyrant?
The depressing thing is,
I've
seen it. No, I've seen this pistol.
You've seen it?
VR.
Oh, I thought you were about to say I know what it is, and I'll be like, wow.
No, I've read the quote, but I can't remember it. And I remember it having some inscribed wording on it and thinking that was cool, but I can't tell you. I have no idea.
Batman, did you know?
No, this is the Sentinel 9, isn't it, and not the SG or 9. It's going to be something DSO related. I want to say something peace through fighting or something daft like that. I think that's their motto.
Romby?
I have no idea. Absolutely zero idea.
Fuck's sake, John, how the fuck?
Is that right? Is it? Oh,
right.
I know peace through fighting is the motto of the DSO, but I didn't know it was inscribed on the gun. That was just a guess. So
Let's
apologies.
cancel the quiz. I mean, how the That is ridiculous. He's through fighting.
Is this in Remake 4?
Yeah.
I remember reading something, but I don't remember that quote because I think that quote would have stuck with me. I must check again. I'm going to have to fire up the old VR version and look at it closely.
It's unbelievable,
well done, John. That's amazing.
I think it's on there's a page about the Sentinel-9 on the Tokyo Maru website, which we've obviously used bits of in the timeline, but I honestly didn't know it was actually inscribed on the gun itself.
Well done.
Peace through fighting. Jesus, what a quote. What an ironic quote. I love that.
Finally, which arm does Thanatos lose? Batman.
I think it's his right arm.
Stars Tyrant.
The right arm.
Rombi.
The right arm.
Is correct, yes. And an easy way to remember that, of course, is Thanatos R, as in right. That's not true. But there we go.
That's exactly what Greg was going for.
That's exactly what it's going for. That means reborn, I think. But there we go. Correct. It's his right arm. Let's have a look at those final scores. And well, an impressive quiz. Sadly, in last place this time is Rombi with 2.5.
I'm okay with that.
That's half. That's not too bad. In second place is Stars Tyrant with 3.5.
Okay.
But this podcast winner with a mightily impressive 4.5 is Batman.
Oh, I'm chuffed because I've been getting some shit scores recently.
So congratulations, Batman. That does conclude this podcast edition of Neptune's Biohazard Quiz. Join us next time where we'll have some more questions. So that means we are rapidly coming to the end of episode 95. We hope everyone has enjoyed our look back at Decisions, and indeed a look back at Resident Evil Outbreak as a whole. We will be, as I've mentioned earlier, looking at Outbreak File 2 later in the year. I think we'll probably give a little bit of a pause on the Outbreak. There's a lot of Outbreak to digest in podcasts after the while, so we'll probably look back at File 2 probably more towards the summer, maybe beginning of summer. So that'll be looking at Wild Things and Underbelly, I think, are the first two. Can't remember. Next up, we are going to be going back to what we are affectionately calling the Mold Era, or the Mouldy Era. So this is a follow-up to the bioterrorism podcast that we did fairly recently. After that, we then get into the soft reboot that is Resident Evil 7 up into Resident Evil Village. But there's a lot of other little extra bits of lore that kind of filters in, and hopefully that'll be a nice little segue into Resident Evil 9, which of course we are hoping is going to be announced sometime this year. It's going to be a deep dive lore look at the Mold Era and what it brings to the table. It should be quite good fun though, John. There's lots to digest there.
Yeah, I think the Mutamycete is a very interesting addition to the lore, and I think that particular period has got lots of interesting things that are not generally well known. So yeah, it'll be an interesting chat.
And a good kind of dive into kind of Blue Umbrella as well, the connections and where we perhaps can potentially see where the storyline's going to go from there. So plenty to look forward to, and hoping we're going to get a Resident Evil 9 announcement sometime this year as well, which of course we will cover here. But I'd like to thank everyone for listening. It's goodbye from me, Neptune.
Goodbye from me, Batman.
Goodbye from me, Stars Tyrant.
And goodbye from me, Robbie.